Chapter 791. The sacrificial evil spirit seemed to have sensed it. He turned around and looked outside the window. I didn't react as strongly as he did. This aura was familiar to me. It should belong to an old friend. However, I couldn't determine his cultivation base. The Mi family's father and son stopped their actions when they saw our reaction. Mi Ding Chung was bewildered, but Mi Tai knew the situation. He thought that the Metaphysics Association had sent this person to trouble him. That was why he asked Mi Ding Chung to leave this place. I waved my hand to tell them not to panic. Perhaps this person wasn't here to deal with Mi Tai. After listening to me, Mi Tai's face relaxed a little. She stood behind me and looked outside the window. After a while, a person landed on the square of the Mi family's manor. It was Han Wenan. It seemed he knew I was here. That was why he had come to find me. I didn't know why. I flew out with the sacrificial evil spirit and landed in front of him. He wasn't surprised to see me. This confirmed my guess that he had come to find me. After exchanging greetings with him for a while, I got straight to the point. Why did you come to find me? Han Wenan was straightforward and directly told me the reason why he was here. According to him, after the heavenly grand ritual, he had heard about Yi Piampian's whereabouts from his family. That was why he had been looking for me. He wanted me to go with him to save Yi Piampian. However, he hadn't heard from me for several months. Today, he passed through Hong Kong. On his way there, he met some severely injured members of the Metaphysics Association. Unexpectedly, he learned my location and came to find me. What a coincidence. The few people from the Metaphysics Association that I dealt with just now actually recognized me. It was normal. With my current reputation, there shouldn't be anyone in the Metaphysics Association who hadn't heard of me. It was normal for them to recognize me from my appearance. However, when Han Wenan mentioned Yi Piampian, my heart tightened. If it weren't for Yi Piampian and Yi Piaolon, I would have died in the Metaphysics Association. I was filled with gratitude towards her. Previously, when Han Wenan had said that he was going to rescue her, I had kept it in mind. However, I had been busy with mundane affairs recently, and there was no news from Han Wenan, so I had put the matter aside. Now that Han Wenan had found where Yi Piampian was, he had to save her. I agreed without hesitation and asked Han Wenan for Yi Piampian's whereabouts. When he heard my question, he moved closer to me and whispered, "Peng Lai Immortal Region." Peng Lai Immortal Realm? I inquired about Yi Piampian and heard that she seemed to be trapped in Peng Lai. That's why I wasn't surprised when Han Wenan said the first two words. However, I was surprised when she said Celestial Realm. Peng Lai was a county town under the jurisdiction of Yintai City in Shandong. However, the Peng Lai Wonderland was the residence of an immortal in the legends. The two could not be mentioned in the same breath. According to legend, the Peng Lai Immortal Realm was one of the three sacred mountains in China's myths and legends. Peng Lai, Yingzhou, and Fangzhong were places where the immortals lived. Since ancient times, they had been the places where Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty had sought immortals and medicines. Everything there was white, and the palaces were made of gold and silver. The trees in the pavilions grew in clusters. There are also records in ancient books that there were 5 mountains to the east of the Bohai Sea: Dayu, Yuanjiao, Fanghu, Yingzhou, and Peng Lai. According to the records, the other 2 mountains had their guardian turtles hooked by the giants of Longbow country and sank into the sea. Hundreds of millions of immortals had migrated there. The legend of the 8 immortals crossing the sea also happened there. According to the legends, Lu Dongbin, Tai Guili, Zhang Guilao, Han Zhongli, Chao Guijiu, He Xingu, Lan Saihe, and Han Xiangzi had gotten drunk at the Peng Lai Pavilion. They had shown off their precious weapons, walked on the waves, and crossed the sea. I had thought that it was just a story made up by our predecessors. I didn't expect the Peng Lai Immortal Region to really exist. However, on second thought, the Liubo Mountain we had been to last time was also real. It wasn't surprising that the Peng Lai Immortal Region was like this. With that in mind, I asked Han Wenan if he knew the exact location of the Peng Lai Immortal Region. He told me that the Peng Lai Immortal Region wasn't in the sea, nor was it in the water. It was above the clouds. This was out of my expectations. The Peng Lai Immortal Region was above the clouds. I was afraid that its exact location wasn't always the same. It would be difficult to find it. I told Han Wenan what I was thinking and asked him if he had a way to determine the location of the Penglai immortal region. Han Wenan looked troubled. He shook his head and said, "After I confirmed the news about Yi Piampian, I hurried to find you." As for the exact location of the Penglai immortal region, he didn't know. I was dumbfounded. Han Wenan had always been a steady person, but he seemed to have lost his composure this time. Since he didn't know, it seemed that I had to solve the problem myself. I began to plan. The last time I went to the Liubo mountain with the evil spirit, I got the news from the Langu platform. However, the Liubo mountain was at the bottom of the sea and hadn't moved for thousands of years. The Penglai immortal region was above the clouds, and it was impossible to find it. If I went to the location recorded in the ancient books, it would be like trying to fish from a tree. The hope of finding it wasn't great. I suddenly had another thought. Prediction and divination were what the fatty and his sect were good at. I might as well ask him for help. Perhaps I could find the answer. I immediately contacted the fatty and told him about my request. The fatty could hear the anxiety in my voice and quickly agreed. After I hung up, I received a message from the fatty. He told me that Immortal Guan predicted that the Penglai immortal region would appear above the clouds to the east of the Bohai Sea in 10 days. However, I couldn't calculate its exact location. Although I couldn't confirm its exact location, I could at least confirm its position. When the time came, Han Wenan and I would search carefully. We should be able to find it. After confirming it, I heaved a sigh of relief. I called Han Wenan and prepared to leave for the Bohai Sea as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, Han Wenan waved his hand and said, "There's no hurry." He even asked me where the Qilin is. The Qilin? I was puzzled by his sudden change of topic. "What's the matter?" Han Wenan then told me that the reason the Penglai immortal region was so secretive wasn't just because of its erratic location. There was another important reason. There was a restriction on the Penglai immortal region that completely isolated it from the outside world. It was said that the power of the restriction was so strong that it couldn't be broken by anyone below the Shaju realm. Outsiders could only enter after obtaining permission to open the restriction. After listening to him, I immediately understood why he had mentioned the Qilin. Previously, at the Heavenly Grand Ritual, the Qilin had stepped on Lu Jinyang to break the restriction of the Wangwu Grotto Heaven. It seemed that he wanted the Qilin to break the restriction of the Penglai immortal region and bring us in. At the moment, we only knew that Yi Piampian was trapped in the Penglai immortal region, but we didn't know who else was inside. We couldn't contact Yi Piampian, so we couldn't ask her to open the restriction. We could only use external force to break it. Han Wenan had seen the Qilin's methods with his own eyes. It was no wonder that he had come up with this idea. However, the Qilin was still in the Wangwu Grotto Heaven. It seemed that before we left, we had to return to Wangwu Mountain. The last time I left the Wangwu Grotto Heaven, I had wanted to bring the Qilin with me, but he didn't want to leave. I was a little worried about whether or not I would be able to bring it out this time. After telling Han Wenan about the Qilin situation, he frowned slightly and urged us to leave. He said that we should reach the Wangwu Grotto Heaven as soon as possible. Then, even if the Qilin didn't want to leave, we would have time to think of a solution. I nodded and didn't delay any longer. I lifted my feet and prepared to leave. However, when I turned to look at Mitai, I hesitated. Although I had taught Mitai techniques casually, since he had succeeded in cultivating them, he could be considered my disciple. When Han Wenan came just now, I had planned to teach him some cultivation techniques, but I was delayed by Han Wenan. Now that I was in a hurry to go to the Wangwu Grotto Heaven, I hesitated. Since I had promised Mitai's father that I would bring Mitai with me, I might as well bring him along this time. I could let him broaden his horizons and have a deeper understanding of the metaphysics world. After hearing my decision, Mitai didn't refuse. Instead, he looked excited. At this moment, Han Wenan noticed Mitai. After looking at him for a while, he asked me with interest, "Are you a member of the witch race?" His cultivation base was much higher than Mitai's, so he could see that Mitai cultivated witchcraft energy. However, I shook my head and didn't answer him. It wasn't that I didn't trust Han Wenan. It was just that the matter of the witch race had many implications. Mitai was just my disciple, so it wasn't appropriate for him to be involved in this matter. Seeing that I didn't answer him, Han Wen didn't pester me further. He just followed us out of the Mi family's manor. After leaving Hong Kong, we spent the entire day to reach the Wanwu Grotto Heaven in northwest Hunan. Although it was the off-season for tourists, Mount Wangwu had beautiful scenery. Many tourists came here to sightsee. We didn't have much time, so we didn't have a mood to linger here. We followed the path that Wang Ken had taken to the top of the mountain. However, when we reached the top, I didn't know where to go next. The Wanwu Grotto Heaven had a formation that isolated it from the outside world. Although I knew a little about formations, the protective formation of the Wanwu Grotto Heaven was so mysterious that I couldn't find any clues about it. Wang Ken had given me a voice-transmitting talisman, but I had broken it during my research. So, I couldn't contact him at this time. It happened so suddenly that I wasn't prepared for it. Han Wen seemed to notice that something was wrong with my face, so he asked me for the reason. I told him about the situation. After listening to me, he couldn't help but laugh. Our heavenly abodes have always been in contact with each other. You lost the voice-transmitting talisman, but I have one. Wait a moment, I'll contact Wang Ken. Then he took out the voice-transmitting talisman and sent a message to Wang Ken. After listening to him, I couldn't help but laugh. I had been so focused on my own matters that I forgot that Han Wen wasn't the same as before. He was now the master of a heavenly abode in Xiqing City. Soon, he received a reply from Wang Ken, who had marked a specific location for us. When we arrived, Ah Fu and a group of servants had been waiting for us for a long time. When they saw me, Ah Fu and the others immediately knelt to greet me. After greeting me, they told me that Wang Ken was on his way here and that he would soon arrive to greet me. The Wanwu Grotto Heaven had always been very respectful to me. Even if I objected, it wouldn't help. Although Han Wen had learned that I had a close relationship with the Wanwu Grotto Heaven during the Heavenly Grand Ritual, he had never seen the people of the Wanwu Grotto Heaven greet me as a servant. So he was shocked to see this scene. As for me, Tai, he was dazzled, and he looked at me with admiration. I didn't explain much. I just waved my hand and asked Ah Fu to take us into the heavenly abode. After we got in, we had only walked a few hundred meters when Officer Wang came to greet us with several servants. When he saw me, Officer Wang looked excited. He didn't care about Han Wen, an outsider, and got down on his knees. He greeted me, calling me Holy Saint. Chapter 792. Perhaps Wang Ken hadn't seen me for a long time, so as soon as he saw me, he bowed to me. I didn't like his behavior, so I just waved my hand and asked him to stand up and lead the way. Seeing that I didn't look happy, Officer Wang smiled and got up from the ground. Then, he took us to the main hall. When I arrived at the Wangwu's abode for the first time, I exclaimed endlessly in admiration towards the various bizarre and beautiful scenes within it, let alone me Tai. As a person of the mortal world, he'd never seen such a scene within the Wangwu's abode, and he exclaimed in admiration all along the way. Of course, Wang Ken's attitude toward me Tai wasn't the same as his attitude toward me. When he saw me Tai's ignorant look, he looked disgusted. Fortunately, he also knew that me Tai had come with me, so he definitely had some relationship with me. Thus, he didn't dare to say anything. I didn't feel offended. Wang Ken had lived in this Wanwu wonderland since he was a child, and he rarely interacted with outsiders. Moreover, he had an extraordinary identity, so it was natural for him to show his emotions. When we were seated in the main hall, Wang Ken greeted the others and asked me why I was here today. I didn't beat around the bush and told him the reason for my visit. After listening to me, Wang Ken nodded and told me, since I left last time, the Qilin had disappeared into these mountains. If he hadn't sensed the Qilin's aura in this Wanwu wonderland, he would have thought that the Qilin had left. I nodded. When we arrived at this Wanwu wonderland, I sensed the Qilin's aura. However, this Wanwu wonderland was so vast that it would take a lot of effort to find the Qilin. We didn't have much time, so we couldn't stay here for too long. I immediately asked Wang Ken to take some people with him to find the Qilin. However, Wang Ken waved his hand and said no. According to him, we were guests of this Wanwu wonderland, so we could let him help us find the Qilin. We were tired from the long journey, so we could rest here. Wang Ken's words made sense, and he was sincere in serving me. However, the Qilin was strange and never obeyed anyone. Even I didn't dare to say that I could bring it back, let alone the people of this Wangwu wonderland. That was why I had to do it myself. After explaining the reason, Wang Can didn't insist. He immediately organized some people to take us to a deserted place in the mountains. Although I could sense the Qilin's aura, the Wangwu wonderland was full of spiritual energy, which almost covered the Qilin's aura. If we didn't pay attention, we would easily miss it. I called Tong Tong and the spirit serpent. They had a good relationship with the Qilin. Perhaps they could find a way to bring it back. We divided into several groups and flew in different directions. Mitai had never been to Wangwu Wonderland, so he wasn't familiar with this place. Of course, he followed me. Around 4 hours later, we finally found the Qilin's trail in a mountain stream. Following that, Zhang Xian followed the dense aura of the nearby Qilin and searched for a while longer before he finally found the Qilin. As we could see him, the Qilin as keen as we could. At this moment, it was playing in a stream near the mountain. Its aura was thick. When it sensed our arrival, it stopped and looked at us from a distance. We quickly landed next to him. I was dumbfounded as I looked at the strange beast with a golden body. Tong Tong and the spirit serpent also opened their eyes wide and shouted in disbelief. Even the evil sacrificial spirit's eyes flashed with astonishment. After a while, he calmed down. The Qilin's earth-shaking transformation reminded me of the time when he refused to leave the Wangwu Wonderland with me. Could it be that he wanted to stay here to cultivate again? Seeing the Qilin's appearance, I didn't need to ask to know that he had absorbed a lot of dragon energy during the time he stayed in the Wangwu Wonderland. That was why his appearance had changed so much. I could sense that the Qilin was now a huge energy body, which gave me a feeling that I was facing the true dragon's veins. I couldn't imagine how much true dragon energy he had absorbed during this time. I speculated that the reason he didn't want to leave with me was because of the true dragon energy in the Wangwu Wonderland. The meow which had planted this Qilin in my body. I only knew that it was a kind of venomous insect. Then it jumped out of my body, and now it had changed into this appearance. I didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I didn't have time to dwell on this matter. I asked Tong Tong to bring the Qilin back to the main hall. The Qilin hadn't seen us for several months. Perhaps he missed Tong Tong, so the two of them were playing happily. The spirit serpent was timidly standing on the side. It looked as if it wanted to go and play, but didn't dare to. Tong Tong nodded when he heard me. He squatted next to the Qilin and whispered something to him. Then, the Qilin turned around and glanced at us. He gently nodded and shook his head. Then he picked up Tong Tong and put him on his back. He whistled twice and flew toward the main hall, ignoring us. I was worried that he wouldn't listen to Tong Tong like before. But now, it seemed that my worries were unnecessary. With Tong Tong, we still had a chance to take the Qilin to the Peng Lai Immortal region. On the way back, I told Officer Wang that we had found the Qilin and asked them to return to the main hall. It seemed that they hadn't gone far. When we returned to the main hall, Officer Wang and the others had returned. They surrounded the Qilin and Tong Tong. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Apparently, they hadn't expected that the Qilin would become like this. As soon as they saw me, the onlookers dispersed. Officer Wang led me to the main hall and asked me about the Qilin. It seemed he was also very curious. When they heard Officer Wang's question, they all turned to look at me, waiting for me to answer their questions. In fact, as long as I closed my eyes and sensed the Qilin's aura, I could guess what had happened. After I told them my conjecture, everyone nodded thoughtfully. As for the Qilin absorbing the true dragon aura, no one, including Officer Wang, cared about it. After all, the Qilin was mine. At this moment, Han Wennan wore a solemn face. He kept gazing at the Qilin as if he was thinking about something. The Qilin was directly related to whether or not we could break the restriction of the Peng Lai Immortal region. Seeing Han Wennan's expression, my face changed. Did you see anything strange? Han Wennan shook his head. I don't know if the Qilin's change is good or bad. However, when the Qilin broke the restriction of Mount Wangwu last time, he used brute force, which must have something to do with his nature. Now that he had changed, his temperament seemed to be much more docile than before. The reason why he frowned was that he was worried whether the Qilin could break the restriction of the Peng Lai immortal region after this change. His words surprised me. When I saw the Qilin, I didn't find him as cold and distant as he used to be. I was so happy that I didn't think too much about it. Now that I listened to his analysis, I felt that something was wrong. The Qilin's change was just as Han Wenan had said. His temperament had changed, and he was completely different from before. On the contrary, I didn't care much about what Han Wenan was worried about. What was done could not be undone. Other than the Qilin, we had no other way to break the restriction. We could only bring the Qilin and try. Whether or not he succeeded, we could only do so. I comforted Han Wenan, but the worry on his face didn't lessen. Instead, he pulled my sleeve and asked anxiously, "If the Qilin can't break the restriction, what should we do?" Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but sigh. Han Wenan was different from me. He had been in love with Yi Piampian for a long time. Although I had thought of rescuing Yi Piampian, I couldn't find an opportunity to do so, so I slowly put it aside. Han Wenan was different. Although it was a one-sided love, he had been thinking about it. When he had the ability to do so, he had acted without hesitation. He had especially brought me along for this. Seeing that he was about to act, it was normal for him to be worried about his gains and losses. I didn't know how to answer him, so I just patted his shoulder and told him that this matter couldn't be rushed. If we couldn't break the restriction, we would go to old President Li and ask for his mercy. After all, Yi Piampian was his disciple. He wouldn't be too cruel to her. After listening to me, Han Wenan's face softened. He nodded and let go of my hand, saying nothing. At this moment, my heart felt heavy. I was just trying to comfort Han Wenan. In fact, how could President Li not know that Yi Piampian was trapped in the Peng Lai immortal region? Moreover, with Yi Piampian's strange background, I didn't know what role President Li played in this matter. Of course, I was indebted to President Li, so I didn't want to criticize him. After thinking for a while, I put this thought aside and didn't think about it anymore. Since we had found the Qilin, I didn't want to stay here any longer. I planned to take the others to say goodbye to Officer Wong. When Officer Wong heard that I wanted to leave, he hurried to dissuade me and asked me to stay here for a few more days. He said that we hadn't seen each other for a long time, and it was the first time that the evil sacrificial spirit in Mitai had come here. He felt guilty that we had to leave before he could entertain us. I waved my hand and told Officer Wong, "You don't need to be so polite. We're in a hurry, and we have something important to do. We can't stay here any longer." As I insisted on leaving, he didn't want to disobey me. He got up and saw us off. However, before we left, I noticed that Mitai didn't want to stay here. I thought for a while and decided to let him stay here. This place had abundant spiritual energy, which was suitable for his cultivation. Moreover, he was too weak, and it would be difficult for him to go to the Peng Lai immortal region. He didn't want to go with us. After confirming this, I called Officer Wong and told him about my relationship with Mitai. I asked him to take good care of Mitai. After listening to me, Officer Wong finally knew Mitai's identity. His expression changed immediately. He didn't look as disgusted as before. He cupped his hands and promised me that he would take good care of Mitai. After talking to Officer Wong, I called Mitai and told him about this. Mitai was reluctant to part with the spiritual energy and beautiful scenery in this place. After hearing my words, he happily agreed. I smiled and patted his shoulder. Then I mobilized the shaman energy in my body and gathered it in my hands. I condensed it into an inky bead and gave it to Mitai. Although the Wangwu cave was full of spiritual qi, and there was a formation that could transform dragon qi into witchcraft qi, that formation still needed to be provided for Wangkan's practice. If Mitai was allowed to practice here, although Wangkan would not say anything, it would be like a dove occupying a magpie's nest, which was very inappropriate. That was why I decided to keep this bead for Mitai's cultivation. As for his future cultivation, he would need to find another Tai Sui. After Mitai received the inky bead, he kneeled in front of me and said, "Take care of yourself." At first, I didn't mean to form a master-disciple relationship with him. But now, when I looked at Mitai's respectful face, I felt that we were related by blood. Chapter 793. After leaving Wangwu Heavenly Cave and walking for several miles, Wang can excuse himself and said, "I won't accompany you." I knew that Wangwu Heavenly Cave had many things to do, but I didn't mind. I waved my hand and asked him to go back. Leaving Wangwu Heavenly Cave meant returning to the human world. Tong Tong, the spirit serpent, and the Qilin weren't suitable to stay outside. Tong Tong and the spirit serpent were fine, but the Qilin wasn't close to me. Although he could stay in the jade bracelet, it wasn't up to me to decide whether he wanted to or not. I asked Tong Tong to persuade him. It seemed the Qilin's temperament was completely different from before. He didn't hesitate and nodded, following Tong Tong back to the jade bracelet. After dealing with them, I took the evil sacrificial spirit and Han Wenan with me, heading down Mount Wangwu. Not long after, we passed by a dilapidated temple. I couldn't help but slow down as I recalled the first time I had visited Mount Wangwu. Before Mo's teacher passed away, he had asked me to take care of him. However, I didn't have time to take care of him. Moreover, he would be in danger if he stayed with me. That was why I had asked Wang, can I take care of him? This time, I didn't see Mo. I wondered how he was doing and if the people from Xuanda, Heavenly Cave, had come to trouble him. While I was thinking, Han Wenan urged me to hurry up. I shook my head reluctantly and put Mo's matter to the back of my mind. I hurried to catch up with him. For hours later, we left Mount Wangwu. Since Han Wenan kept urging me, I didn't dare to linger. I followed him and took a taxi to Tianjin. Our destination was the Bohai Sea. According to our current location, the nearest port to the Bohai Sea was Tianjin. When we arrived in Tianjin, it was 9:00 p.m. We randomly found a hotel to stay in. After a long day of traveling, my body was a little tired. Right when I was about to rest, Han Wenan knocked on my door. "I have something to discuss with you." Seeing his serious face, I didn't refuse him and invited him in. As soon as he sat down, he said, "We're going to go out to sea." I didn't hurry to talk to him. I had some thoughts in my head. Han Wenan's face was calm. Perhaps he already had an idea. I wanted to see how he planned this operation. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Han Wenan seemed to have guessed what I was thinking. After drinking a glass of water, he began to tell me his plan. According to him, although we had arrived at the Bohai Sea this time, the Penglai Immortal region was not in the sea, so we could not take a boat out to sea. The only feasible way was to take a flying vehicle or fly there directly. However, if we fly, we will inevitably be noticed. This is too risky and not worth it. Han Wenan's thoughts were clear. After his analysis, it was indeed reasonable. Speaking of flying tools, I immediately thought of helicopters. But this thing isn't easy to get, and air traffic control is strict, so it's very difficult for us to use it privately. However, since Han Wenan mentioned this matter, there should be a solution. I told him what I was thinking and asked him if he had any solutions. Han Wenan didn't dawdle when I asked. He said that after he left Wangwu Mountain, he contacted his family and asked them to send a helicopter over. As for the air traffic control, his family had already informed them. Hearing him say that, I felt relieved. The Han family was an aristocratic family that studied metaphysics, so they had some power. It wouldn't be difficult for them to solve this problem. I thought about it and nodded, indicating that it was feasible. Han Wenan didn't say anything else after I agreed. He cupped his fists at me and returned to his room. We didn't leave the hotel for several days. When the deadline of 10 days was up, we hurried to Tonggu Airport. It was still early in the morning, and since Jinren Guan hadn't predicted when the Penglai Immortal Pavilion would appear, we had to go there early in the morning to check. After we sat down, the plane flew in the direction of the Bohai Sea. Along the way, we didn't talk. Our eyes were fixed on the clouds outside, not daring to miss anything. However, after several hours, we didn't find anything. I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Could it be that Jinren Guan's divination was wrong? However, I quickly rejected this idea. Jinren Guan was the sect master of the divination sect, and he had never made a mistake in his divination. Since the Penglai Immortal Pavilion hadn't appeared yet, it was possible that it wasn't time yet. Sure enough, at noon, I sensed a faint fluctuation of spiritual energy in a cloud. Perhaps the Penglai Immortal Pavilion was hiding in the clouds. Han Wenan seemed to have sensed it. He turned to look at me. I knew what he meant. I hurried to call the sacrificial evil spirit and flew toward the clouds. Han Wen said something to the pilot, then flew toward us. After a few seconds, we landed in the clouds. At this time, the spiritual energy was even denser. However, it was still a vast expanse of white in front of us. We couldn't see what was inside. Seeing this, Han Wen asked me to summon the Qilin. After listening to him, I didn't hurry to summon the Qilin. Instead, I stared at the clouds in front of us and fell in a deep thought. Based on this spiritual energy, we couldn't determine if the Penglai Immortal Pavilion was in the clouds or not. Even if it was the Penglai Immortal Pavilion, we couldn't act rashly. Previously, we had only seen the Qilin break the restrictions of the Wangwu Grotto Heaven. But now that its temperament had changed, we didn't know if it could break the restrictions. Moreover, the restrictions of the Penglai Immortal Pavilion had been set up by an expert several thousand years ago. I was afraid that they were much stronger than the ones in the Wangwu Grotto Heaven. Before we had a clear understanding of the situation, we couldn't act rashly. Thinking about this, I told Han Wen about my considerations and signaled him not to be anxious. Then, I asked the sacrificial evil spirit to go and investigate the situation. His power was the strongest, so it was safe to let him go. After listening to me, the sacrificial evil spirit rushed into the clouds without hesitation. After a few seconds, he flew back and landed in his original position. Seeing his strange expression, I hurried to ask about the situation inside. He paused and said, "There's indeed a very powerful restriction here. I can't break it." I wasn't surprised to hear that. Back at Billow Mountain, I had relied on the Eastern Emperor Bell and the Xianyuan sword to break the restriction. No matter how powerful the sacrificial evil spirit was, it couldn't be strong enough to resist an ancient divine weapon. However, his words convinced me that the clouds were indeed the location of the Penglai Immortal Pavilion. Since I was certain, I didn't hesitate and asked Tong Tong to bring the Qilin out. As soon as the Qilin came out, he looked very happy. I didn't think it was strange. The Qilin had a strong perception of spiritual energy. It was probably because of this that he had stayed in Wangwu Grotto Heaven. Seeing the Qilin's expression, I felt a little more confident. I didn't linger and asked Tong Tong to let the Qilin break the restriction in the clouds to bring us in. Tong Tong lowered her body and whispered something in the Qilin's ear. The Qilin retreated and exerted force on his legs, rushing into the clouds. We didn't dare to be negligent and hurried to follow him. After passing through the clouds in front of them, a rainbow appeared. The rainbow was colorful, and it was very beautiful. However, we didn't have time to admire it, because the Qilin had rushed to the rainbow and bumped into it. Seeing this, I couldn't help but clench my fists. In the blink of an eye, we heard a thunderous rumble. The Qilin twisted his body and broke through the restriction. He ran in, leaving behind a continuously shaking gap. Han Wen and I exchanged looks and followed him. After everyone had crossed the gap, I turned to look at the place where we had come in. Unexpectedly, the gap was repairing itself at a speed visible to the naked eye. This scene reminded me of the time when we had left Billows Mountain. The restriction there could also repair itself automatically. Could it be that these two places were related? At this moment, Han Wen suddenly patted my shoulder and pulled me out of my thoughts. His face was blank as he pointed at a place in front of him. I was puzzled and looked in the direction he was pointing at. I was shocked by what I saw. I was standing at the top of a mountain, and I could see the entire Penglai Immortal Realm. The Penglai Immortal Realm was surrounded by a vast expanse, like an isolated island. This was very similar to the Billows Mountain that we had been to before. There were several houses in the Immortal Realm. It seemed that many people lived here all year round. Not only that, but there were also several hectares of fertile land. This reminded me of the peach blossom spring that was described in ancient texts. The land was flat, and the houses were majestic. There were fertile land, beautiful ponds, mulberries, and bamboos. The scene in front of me wasn't any different. Perhaps Han Wen was attracted by the beautiful scenery as he stood by my side and didn't speak for a long time. However, I sensed something strange from the evil, sacrificial spirit's face. Although this was the immortal realm, it was our first time here, so we had to be careful. I asked the evil, sacrificial spirit what he had found. He frowned and moved closer to me, whispering, "This place is very strange. I can't use my shaman energy." His words surprised me, and I quickly tried to feel the shaman energy in my body. It was just as the evil, sacrificial spirit had said. Although I could feel the existence of shaman energy, I couldn't use it. Could it be that there was some formation in the immortal realm that could affect shaman energy? After hearing my words, the evil, sacrificial spirit shook his head, indicating that he didn't know either. After knowing the situation, I wasn't in the mood to enjoy the scenery. Previously, when the restriction automatically repaired itself, I guessed that the Penglai immortal realm and Billows Mountain were related. When I saw the scenery in the immortal realm, I had the same feeling. Now that I couldn't use my shaman energy, I was even more certain of my guess. However, the key point wasn't something that could be figured out in a short time. Now that I couldn't use my shaman energy, I had lost my strongest helper. I didn't know what kind of trouble I would encounter on this trip to the immortal realm. The people who live in the immortal realm definitely weren't ordinary people. The current situation was disadvantageous to us, so we had to be more cautious. Chapter 794. Hearing this voice, I immediately realized that I had been discovered. At the same time, I also sensed that the person who spoke was standing behind us. I focused and sensed a little, but I couldn't determine his cultivation. However, from his silent appearance beside us and the strong Taoist aura that he emitted, this person's cultivation was at least not below that of the sacrificial evil spirit. Right now, the sacrificial evil spirit, and I couldn't use witchcraft aura, and Han Wan-Nan was only at the later stage of the Seal realm. This meant that even if the three of US joined forces, the odds of winning were not high. Han Wan-Nan obviously understood this. He didn't even turn around and whispered to me with a serious face, "Zhou Yi, what should we do? Should we split up and run?" When in danger, the instinctive reaction was to run. However, the person behind us was too strong. I was afraid that we wouldn't even have a chance to run. I shook my head at Han Wan-Nan to calm him down. Then, I took a deep breath and turned around. With just a glance, I was stunned. The person in front of me was holding a horsetail whisk and wearing a black Taoist robe. It was the white-haired old man who had bestowed the serpent spirit, the dragon transformation, at Dragon Gate Mountain. I remembered that he had claimed to be from Dragon Gate Temple. Why was he in this Penglai immortal region? Could it be that the Dragon Gate Temple he mentioned was also in this immortal region? Meeting an old friend for the first time, I was stunned and didn't speak for a long time. Han Wan-Nan also turned his head and looked at my stunned expression. He couldn't understand it at all. He gently touched me with his arm as if he wanted to wake me up. The shock of my heart eased a little. After thinking for a while, I cupped my hands at the old man in front of me and said loudly, "It's been a long time. Senior, you are still as elegant as ever." The old man didn't seem to remember me. His face was cold, and he ignored my words. Instead, he asked, "Who are you? Why did you break into this place?" I was stunned and immediately reacted. The last time we met, I was only at Shiryao cultivation. It was reasonable that a reclusive expert like him didn't remember me. However, the situation was dangerous. If I could make friends with him, it would be better to do so. With that thought in mind, I summoned the serpent spirit. The old man didn't remember me, but he must have some impression of the serpent spirit. After the serpent spirit appeared, it immediately noticed the white-haired old man in front of it. Immediately, its expression changed. "Old man, why are you here?" Could it be that I, the Dragon Lord, have had some good fortune recently and am going to transform into a true dragon? This fellow was really open-minded. At this moment, he could actually think of such a wonderful thing. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I quickly reached out to pull him back and carefully raised my head to look at the white-haired old man. As I had expected, the old man's gaze instantly changed after the spirit snake appeared. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. "So, it's you, hairless animal?" I haven't seen a snake transform into a flood dragon for over 100 years. You're really lucky to have cultivated a human form." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand, and the serpent's spirit flew to his side uncontrollably. After getting closer, the white-haired old man pressed his hand on the serpent spirit's head and stared at the small horn on the serpent spirit's head. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes as he said, "Interesting." After saying that, he waved his hand, and the snake's spirit flew back to its original position like a marionette. I didn't know what the old man meant. Worried that he would hurt the serpent spirit, I quickly willed the serpent spirit to return to my body. At this moment, the white-haired old man had already returned to normal. His expression wasn't as cold as before. He asked me, "You're also a person with good fortune, but why have you trespassed into my Peng Lai immortal realm today?" Hearing his words, I was instantly shocked. Did he mean that he was the owner of this Peng Lai immortal realm? Although I had never seen an immortal before, this was the Peng Lai immortal realm. If he was the owner of this place, and he had previously bestowed righteousness to the serpent spirit, it seemed reasonable to say that he was an immortal. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but be more careful. I raised my hand and bowed to him. "I didn't mean to offend you today. I'm only here to find an old friend." In the face of such overwhelming power, I didn't dare to have any other thoughts. I could only speak my mind. This was the safest method. As for the outcome, I could only leave it to fate. Hearing my words, the white-haired old man frowned slightly. He said softly, "This is a place for cultivation. Why have you come here to find someone? You should leave as soon as possible." After saying that, he waved the horsetail whisk in his hand, as if he wanted to drive us away. Seeing this, I panicked and quickly said, "The old friend I'm looking for is called Yi Piampian. Please allow me to meet her." Perhaps it was because he heard Yi Piampian's name, but the white-haired old man stopped what he was doing. He lifted his head and looked at me thoughtfully. After a moment of silence, he suddenly nodded. "I've heard Brotherly mention this name before. If you're here to find her, go look for her yourself. Remember, don't stay for too long. Once you've found her, leave as soon as possible." After saying that, he didn't seem to care about this matter anymore. He turned and left. He had only taken 2 or 3 steps when he disappeared. After he left, I let out a long breath. Although my expression didn't change when I was talking to him, I was under a lot of pressure. Now, I relaxed a little and thought about what he had said. He mentioned Brotherly. After thinking for a while, I understood that this Brotherly should be the old president. From his appearance, he seemed to have a good relationship with the old president. He should know about Yi Piampian's matter. Since that was the case, judging from his attitude, Yi Piampian's current situation shouldn't be too bad. The old president's attitude towards this matter didn't seem to be what I had thought. This speculation made me feel much more relaxed. Moreover, the white-haired old man had allowed us to look for Yi Piampian. The situation had suddenly turned around. Of course, even so, I didn't tarry any longer. After thinking for a while, I led the evil, sacrificial spirit and Han Wen down the mountain along the small path. Previously, when we were at the top of the mountain, overlooking the Peng Lai immortal region, it looked like a green island hanging in the sky. The scenery was quite pleasant. After descending the mountain, we were surrounded by dense forests. Although the scenery wasn't bad, it was difficult to find someone here. Fortunately, when we were at the top of the mountain, we had seen a village in the depths of the forest, so we still remembered the location. The white-haired old man and President Li were all immortals, so it wasn't difficult for them to survive in the wind and dew. However, Yi Piampian wasn't so noble. Logically speaking, she must be living in that village. After making up my mind, I didn't hesitate anymore. Following the direction I had seen earlier, we went all the way into the forest. In the forest, the road was rugged and difficult to walk. Although I still had Taoist chi in my body, I couldn't fly here with my cultivation, let alone Han Wen. So, we could only walk along the rugged mountain road with great difficulty. We hadn't gone far when I turned to look, but I didn't know where the Qilin had gone. I didn't pay much attention to it. It was eccentric and playful. It would be strange if it could stay by my side with peace of mind. The Peng Lai immortal region was the same as Billows Mountain. They were both otherworldly places, but compared to Billows Mountain, this place was much quieter. We didn't encounter any mountain spirits or wild monsters along the way, nor did we fall into any formation or barrier. Even so, it took us 4 hours to walk out of the forest. The Chelan was still nowhere to be seen, but the village we had seen earlier was now in front of us. There were dozens of houses in the village, all made of straw. Some of them were single-room houses, while others were independent courtyards. They were arranged in an orderly manner. However, I took a closer look. The doors of the houses were tightly shut, and there wasn't a single person outside. Not only that, but when we stepped in, we didn't sense any aura. Could it be that no one lived in this village? But in the vast Peng Lai immortal region, if Yi Piampian didn't live in this village, where else could she live? Han Wenin seemed to have realized this as well. He furrowed his brows and whispered to me, Yi Piampian is definitely on this island. Didn't that old man admit it? What he said was true. Han Wenan's information might have been wrong, but the white-haired old man had no reason to lie to us. It seemed that Yi Piampian was definitely on this island. As for why we couldn't sense her aura, maybe there was something strange about this island, or maybe President Li did it on purpose. With this thought in mind, I nodded at Han Wenan and said, this village is the most likely place for Yi Piampian. Since we can't sense her aura, let's go from house to house and look for her. However, you have to be careful. This is the residence of an immortal. Don't be careless. If you offend someone, you won't be able to save them and will bring disaster to yourself. Han Wenan nodded and said in a muffled voice, of course I know. Then, he took the lead and strode toward an independent courtyard. I didn't waste any time. I took the sacrificial evil spirit in another direction and split up with Han Wenan to search. When we reached a small courtyard, I carefully knocked on the door. After a long time, I didn't get a response. Then, I pushed the door open and walked in to search carefully. I didn't find anything in the courtyard, so I tiptoed out and carefully closed the door. Then, I walked toward another courtyard. There were only a few dozen houses in the village. However, as we tiptoed and cautiously searched, our speed wasn't fast. After a full hour, I finally found signs of someone living in a remote courtyard. I was overjoyed. Just as I was about to enter another house, the unlatched door in front of me was pushed open. A slender figure in a black robe suddenly walked out. Yi Piampian, seeing this figure, I couldn't help but be stunned. I subconsciously called out her name. Chapter 795. After hesitating for a while, I didn't hug Yi Piampian, nor did I say anything to comfort her. I just let her hug me, sobbing in my chest. Han Wenan heard the commotion and came over. When he saw Yi Piampian hugging me tightly, he nodded at me expressionlessly. Then, he stood next to me, waiting for Yi Piampian to vent her emotions. After a long while, Yi Piampian finally calmed down and slowly let go of me. She seemed to have realized that she had lost her composure. She retreated to the side and silently wiped the tears off her face. However, she didn't apologize. Her behavior reminded me of the cold Yi Piampian we had met for the first time. After she calmed down, she invited us into the room to talk. The decorations in the room weren't much different from the ones we had seen before, but it had a little more fragrance. After we sat down, she asked us how we had found this place. I didn't hurry to answer and looked at Han Wenan next to me. Yi Piampian seemed to have sensed something from my gaze as she also looked at Han Wenan. Han Wenan and Yi Piampian looked at each other for a few seconds. He immediately retracted his gaze and looked elsewhere, his face blushing. His reaction made me feel helpless. It seemed that it would be difficult to make Han Wenan tell me the truth. Then I told Yi Piampian the whole story. She didn't change her expression and looked at Han Wenan. Then she cupped her fists and said, I'm sorry to have caused you trouble. Han Wenan was delighted and waved his hand to indicate that it was all right. He didn't look like he would be able to recover in a short time. I asked Yi Piampian what had happened in the past year and emphasized on why she and Yi Maolon had behaved that way when I was in the glorious state of consciousness. Yi Piampian was straightforward and told me the whole story. I learned from her that when she had met Yi Maolon at Mount Huangguanshan, she had learned of Nangong's plan. Nangong had predicted that I would advance to the glorious state of consciousness after the strange phenomenon in the sky. It was also at that time that the people from the Metaphysics Association would attack me to eliminate me, the so-called remnant of the witch race. After learning of this, Nangong made a plan to have Yi Piampian and Yi Maolon put aside their differences and work together to save my life. As I listened to her narration, I couldn't help but recall what had happened that day. Yi Piampian and Yi Maolon had clasped their hands in front of me. Then, they had transformed into a half-red, half-white bird. Then the life-bright stone that the old president had given me had suddenly transformed and sucked me in. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but ask her about the flying bird and the shining stone. Yi Piampian shook her head and said that she didn't know about the flying bird. As for the bright stone, old President Li had never mentioned it to her. Her words made me think. Back then, the bright stone that the old president had given me with the word life engraved on it suddenly changed at such a crucial moment. It was obvious that the old president had predicted this. However, I didn't understand why he would save me time and time again when he clearly knew that I had shaman chi in my body. What exactly was his objective? Yi Piampian saw that I didn't react, so she continued. She and Yi Maolon had lost consciousness after transforming into birds. When she woke up, I was nowhere to be seen. Even Nangong and Yi Maolon were gone. Only the people from the Metaphysics Association were left to search for me. After Yi Piampian woke up, she didn't hurry to find me. She knew that Nangong must have saved me, so she returned home alone. After returning home, the old president brought her to the Peng Lai immortal region. At that time, the old president didn't say anything and only sealed her veins of the heavens. Yi Piampian vaguely knew what had happened, so she didn't ask about it. After listening to her, I didn't understand. The old president had given me the bright stone and didn't stop Yi Piampian's actions. This showed his stance. Perhaps he didn't show up because of his status in the metaphysics world. I can understand that. However, why did he bring Yi Piampian to the Peng Lai immortal region? I pondered over this for a long time. Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind. I understood the old president's intentions. Back then, Yi Piampian had ignored the Metaphysics Association's opposition and insisted on saving me. She was already standing on the opposite side of the Metaphysics Association. In the eyes of the Metaphysics Association, it was an unforgivable crime to save a survivor of the witch tribe. After this, the Metaphysics Association wouldn't let Yi Piampian off. However, Yi Piampian was President Li's disciple. If the Metaphysics Association wanted to punish her, they had to consider President Li. However, the old president was also a member of the Metaphysics Association. Although he supported Yi Piampian's actions, he couldn't do it openly. However, Yi Piampian couldn't be handed over to the Metaphysics Association. Left with no choice, the old president brought Yi Piampian to the Peng Lai immortal region. The Peng Lai immortal region was hard to find. Moreover, the barrier outside couldn't be broken by external forces. Yi Piampian was indeed very safe here. Thinking about this, I suddenly understood. I originally thought that the old president locked Yi Piampian here to punish her. I didn't expect there to be such a deeper meaning. Now that I knew the old president's intentions, if I brought Yi Piampian out, not only would I waste the old man's efforts, but the Metaphysics Association would also notice. Fortunately, I had an expert like the sacrificial evil spirit with me. In the Metaphysics Association, President Li was probably the only one who could fight against him. I didn't have to worry about other small fries. Thinking about this, I told Yi Piampian to pack up and leave the Peng Lai immortal region with us before the white-haired old man noticed. After hearing my words, Han Wenan immediately stood up and was about to urge Yi Piampian to leave. However, to my surprise, Yi Piampian shook her head and refused us. Han Wenan and I were shocked to see her like that. I didn't expect her to make such a decision. Could it be that there was some hidden reason? Thinking about this, I anxiously asked her if she had any difficulties. Yi Piampian didn't respond immediately. After a long silence, she sighed and said, I know my current situation. If I go out with you, I'll be a burden to you. Moreover, my master has already warned me that I can't leave the Penglai immortal region before he returns. Otherwise, the consequences will be unpredictable. Her words made me calm down instantly. It wasn't because I was afraid of being implicated by her. This matter started because of me, and it was my duty to protect Yi Piampian. However, she mentioned that the consequences would be unpredictable. This reminded me of the woman who looked exactly like Yi Piampian in the Yinshu royal mausoleum. The old president wasn't someone who spoke without thinking. The consequences he mentioned were probably related to this matter. Understanding this, I gave up on the idea of taking Yi Piampian with me. Since she didn't want to leave with us, it was useless to persuade her. At this time, I didn't need to worry about the old man anymore. It wouldn't hurt to stay here for a while longer. I didn't mention this matter again. Instead, I told Yi Piampian about my experiences in the past year. However, I didn't tell her some key things. Yi Piampian didn't interrupt me. She just sat there and listened quietly. Things would eventually come to an end, so I didn't want to stay any longer. I stood up to bid farewell to Yi Piampian. Hearing that I was leaving, Yi Piampian's throat moved as if she wanted to say something to persuade me to stay. However, she didn't say anything in the end. She probably knew that I still had a lot of things to do and couldn't stay in the Penglai immortal region forever. She walked toward me and moved her hands as if she wanted to hug me. However, she seemed to realize something and her hand stopped in midair. She paused and said, Take care of yourself. I nodded and prepared to leave with Han Wanan. Unexpectedly, he shook his head, indicating that he wanted to stay here for a few more days. He told me that he had instructed the pilot to wait for us at the same place that night, and that he would take us back after we had gotten out of here. Looking at his appearance, he really didn't want to leave just like that. Since I couldn't take Yi Piampian away, it wouldn't hurt to let him stay here for a few more days. Since he insisted, I didn't try to persuade him. After today's matter, Yi Piampian's attitude toward Han Wanan had changed. She didn't want to drive him away. After thanking Han Wanan, I left the village with the evil, sacrificial spirit. However, I didn't plan on leaving the Penglai immortal region. Firstly, I wanted to take this opportunity to thoroughly investigate the connection between the Penglai immortal region and Billowing Waves Mountain. Secondly, the Qilin's whereabouts were still unknown. If I didn't find it, I wouldn't be able to rest easy. Unexpectedly, we met the white-haired old man again when we left the village. He had his back to us and was standing not far away with his hand behind his back. It seemed that he was waiting for us. I was suspicious, but I didn't dare to be negligent. I hurriedly ran to his back and cupped my hands in greeting. Senior, what can I do for you? After hearing my words, the white-haired old man slowly turned around and asked softly, Did you see your old friend? I didn't know why he was doing this. Could it be that he was waiting for me here just to ask about this? I couldn't figure out the reason, so I told him the truth. The old man nodded, stroked his beard, and continued to ask, Are you looking for that beast? His words stunned me, but I immediately understood. The old man should be referring to the Qilin. From what he said, did he know where the Qilin was? Or did he capture the Qilin? I pondered. Since he didn't look angry, the Qilin probably didn't offend him. In that case, the old man probably wanted to tell me where the Qilin was. Thinking about this, I hurriedly nodded and asked about the Qilin's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, the old man's face lit up. He waved at me and told me not to look for the Qilin as it couldn't leave with me. After hearing this, I couldn't help but feel puzzled. I didn't know what the old man's intentions were. Why did he say that the Qilin couldn't leave with me? Could it be that he knew the Qilin's purpose and wanted to take it for himself? However, on second thought, the old man was the master of the Penglai immortal region. If he really wanted to keep the Qilin, he didn't have to tell me. He only needed to hide the Qilin. When I felt that there was no hope of finding it, I would leave. Chapter 796. When I heard this voice, I froze on the spot. There was no other reason than that I was too familiar with the words you'll know in the future. From the very beginning, when Bine appeared by my side, to the Nangong Palace, to the sacrifice of the evil spirit. Until now, I can't remember how many people have told me the words, "You'll know in the future." Although this white-haired old man is the master of Punglai, it's really not strange to hear him say these words. I didn't even bother to guess the reason. After thinking for a while, I concluded that the Qilin wouldn't be in any danger if he stayed here. Moreover, the white-haired old man was far more powerful than me, and I owed him a debt of gratitude for not obstructing my search for Yipampian. So, I didn't hesitate and turned to leave. Han Wenan stayed here, while the sacrificial evil spirit and I walked back to where we had come from. Soon, we arrived at the place where we had come from. But when we got here, I realized a problem. When we first came here, we relied on the Qilin to break the barrier. Now that the Qilin stayed here and didn't follow us, how could we get out? I was dumbfounded. When I was talking to the old man, I only cared about the Qilin and didn't think about our own safety. I want to find the old man again, but how could we find him in the vast Punglai immortal region? He was a person with great cultivation, and he didn't live in a village like Yipampian. While I was thinking, the sacrificial evil spirit suddenly walked to the barrier in front of us. He stared at the seemingly empty barrier for a while, then suddenly reached out and pressed on the barrier. Seeing his actions, I was startled and wanted to stop him. In the Punglai immortal region, witchcraft energy was suppressed and couldn't be used. Although the sacrificial evil spirit's cultivation was high, his power wasn't as strong as mine. Moreover, the barrier of the Punglai immortal region was extremely powerful. If he acted rashly, he might be counterattacked. As soon as I stopped him, the sacrificial evil spirit's hand had already passed through the barrier and reached the other side. I was dumbfounded again. I didn't expect this at all. It seemed that the Punglai immortal region was difficult to enter, but easy to get out. There were endless obstacles on the way in, but it was easy to get out. Since that was the case, I didn't waste any more time and followed the sacrificial evil spirit out. When we got outside, we saw that the sky was already dark. A helicopter was hovering not far from us. It was the helicopter that Han Wan-in had left here to pick us up. Seeing us, the helicopter quickly flew over and opened the hatch to let us in. After getting on the helicopter, someone asked where the sacrificial evil spirit was. After I told him the truth, he didn't ask anything and directly drove the helicopter to return. After returning to the hotel, I directly packed my luggage and left. However, I didn't go back to Shenzhen. Instead, I went to the Jingshu land. Calculating the time, it was almost time for me to meet Lao AI in half a year. I naturally wouldn't miss it. Speaking of the Fire God Temple, I recalled the silver-eyed man from back then, who was also Shang-Chi. The last time I went there, I didn't see him, and I didn't know if he was still in the Fire God Temple. A few days ago, I met Wang Hai in the Spirit Lock Tower and wanted to tell Shang-Chi about it. After all, Wang Hai was his descendant. On the way south, when I had nothing to do, I couldn't help but think about Lao AI. I didn't know how she had been in the past 6 months. Had she been reading ancient scrolls and waiting for the meeting on the Magpie Bridge every 6 months? When I saw Yipampian in the Punglai immortal region, I thought more about Lao AI. Yipampian could only be considered a passerby in my life, but Lao AI was different. Ever since I was a teenager, she had been by my bedside every night. All of my fantasies and expectations about women had been pinned on her. Later on, she had led me on this path, and I had gradually discovered my hidden identity. It could be said that from the first time we met, my life had been intertwined with Lao AI and couldn't be separated. If it weren't for the so-called heavenly path, Lao AI and I would have been living together by now. When I first found out that the heavenly path was obstructing us, I couldn't control the anger in my heart. Now, my heart was much calmer, but I didn't dare to forget the oath I made. My mind became more resolute. It was just that in the past 6 months, my cultivation had stagnated due to the instability of my foundation, due to the rapid advancement of my cultivation. I hadn't advanced for a long time. Now that I had experienced so many things, my temperament and foundation had become much more stable. It was time to improve myself again. Of course, the advancement of cultivation wasn't something that could be decided with just a few words. After meeting Lao AI this time, I had to put in more effort. At the very least, it was time to meet the Tai Sui in Thailand. As I was thinking about this, we had arrived at the Shenangjia forest area. It was late at night, and the scenic area was naturally closed. After I got off the car with the evil pre-spirit, I flew up and rushed all the way. Not long after, we arrived outside the fire god temple. Perhaps it was because of the homesickness. I was a little nervous as I looked at the fire god temple hidden in the darkness. I stood there in silence. After a long time, I exhaled and stepped in. In the fire god temple was silent. On the red platform, the red chair was still there. However, there was no one in the hall, and the contract hadn't appeared. There were still a few days before Lao AI would appear. I wasn't in a hurry. I let the evil pre-spirit do as he pleased while I went to my bedroom to meditate. I meditated for 3 days. At noon on the third day, I opened my eyes. Before I could get up, I heard a voice from behind me. "Husband." It was still a gentle and deep voice. It was calm and otherworldly, as though she hadn't waited for half a year and was just welcoming her husband who had left in the morning. My heart was instantly filled with sweetness. I stood up and slowly turned around. She was still wearing the red wedding dress from back then, and she still had the same gentle smile. Looking at her now, all the matters in my heart were tossed aside. All the filth that I had experienced in the past 6 months had been washed clean. I didn't say anything, and neither did she. She slowly walked in front of me and hugged me with her soft and cold body. On the way here, I had so many things that I couldn't wait to say to her. However, after seeing her, I didn't want to say a single word. I just wanted to freeze this happiness and satisfaction forever. At this moment, saying anything would be a blasphemy against this happiness. After an hour, the greed in my heart eased a little. I moved my arm slightly, and Lao AI came out of my embrace. She was still smiling as she asked me about what I had experienced in the past 6 months. Ever since I had stepped on the path of cultivation, I hadn't lived a peaceful life. Although it had only been half a year, I had experienced many things. Lao AI and I sat down and picked up some trivial things, telling her bit by bit. There was no light source in the bedroom. We didn't care about the sky outside and just talked. When we talked about dangerous things, I didn't avoid it, and Lao AI didn't worry about it. Her eyes were full of heartache. When we talked about other things, such as the rescue of Ampian, Lao AI smiled and gave a brief comment. "She's a good woman." I smiled back at her. "Is she as good as you?" I didn't know why, but the smile on Lao AI's face grew wider. She nodded affirmatively. "Yes, as good as me. If I had a choice, I would naturally want to forget everything and stay here with Lao AI forever." However, we couldn't do what ordinary couples were used to doing. Happy times were always short. The next day, Lao AI got up early and prepared food for me, like the most ordinary wife. After the meal, we cleaned up the dishes and sat for a while before discussing the next meal. Lunch was naturally the best time to eat after noon, but we couldn't do that. We started to prepare the meal early. She was the chef, and I was the assistant. I had never done kitchen chores before, so it was inevitable that I was clumsy. Lao AI, on the other hand, wasn't a woman who often handled pots and pans. He had planned to finish the meal at noon, but he only managed to finish it when it was already noon. Lao AI stood by the dining table and reached out to touch my cheek with a smile. Her voice was still soft, but the sadness of parting couldn't be concealed. She said, "Hubby can only eat this meal alone." I nodded, but I couldn't say anything. Lao AI wanted to say something, but her figure had already blurred. She didn't even give me time to linger and disappeared in the blink of an eye. I didn't say anything until I couldn't find a trace of red in front of me. Then, I sat down and carefully ate all the food on the dining table. Afterward, I got up and looked around the small bedroom before turning to leave. Even after I left the fire god temple, the silver-eyed man still hadn't appeared. Naturally, I couldn't tell him about Wang Hai. On the other hand, the sacrificial evil spirit, who had disappeared earlier, was standing outside waiting for me. After seeing me, he didn't ask about the past few days, nor did he ask about Lao AI. He just nodded at me and turned to walk in the direction he had come from. After leaving the fire god temple, I arrived at the Shenangjia scenic area. Just as I was thinking about whether or not to return to Shenzhen, the phone in my pocket rang. Recently, I had almost stopped using my phone. There were only a few people who knew my number, and almost all of them had the voice-transmitting talisman that I had given them. Usually, when I contacted them, I used the voice-transmitting talisman. I rarely used my phone. That was why I felt strange when I heard my phone ringing. When I took it out, I saw that it was an unfamiliar number. Puzzled, I pressed the answer button. As soon as I put the phone to my ear, I heard a hurried voice of a woman. "Hello, Mr. Zhou. You finally picked up. I'm Fong Min. Do you remember me, Mr. Zhou?" The person spoke quickly, and I didn't find Fong Min's name familiar. As I was about to deny it, the voice on the phone rang again. "A few years ago, we met on a train. At that time, I was a red and white escort. As soon as I heard the words red and white acquaintances, I suddenly remembered something. A few years ago, after I was chased by Liang Tianxin, I was on my way home from Shenangjia to celebrate the New Year. At that time, I saw Fong Min on a train. At that time, she was telling someone a story. In the middle of the story, she mentioned her job as a red and white escort. She also mentioned a strange incident that she had experienced. It was because I had overheard her story that I gave her my phone number. However, the incident that I had heard at that time was very strange. I knew that if she got involved in this matter, something bad would happen to her soon. That was why I gave her my phone number to sow good karma. However, a few years had passed, and I hadn't received any news from her. I thought that the incident that year was most likely because she had met with a calamity and was no longer in this world. I didn't expect that I would receive her message at this time. Chapter 797. Fong Min's voice was still hurried on the phone. She said that every night, she would dream of an old man staring at her. He didn't talk, and his dark eyes scared her. Moreover, this dream lasted for many days. She couldn't eat or sleep well. She had previously worked as a red and white guest, so she had heard a lot about ghosts and evil spirits. After this happened, she quickly went to find someone to ask for a talisman. When she slept at night, she put on her chest to ensure her safety. It was good that she didn't ask for the talisman. That night, the old man appeared again. At the same time, Fong Min felt a burning pain in her chest. She opened her eyes and found that the talisman on her chest was burning. She hurried to put out the fire, but only half of the talisman was left. When the talisman caught fire, Fong Min felt that it was even more dangerous. She didn't dare to close her eyes that night. The next morning, she dragged her tired body to find the Taoist priest who had given her the talisman. She wanted to find another way. Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished her story, the Taoist priest looked frightened. He didn't say anything and ran away. Fong Min didn't know what to do in this situation. She didn't have any other way to find someone who knew about this. In a hurry, she remembered me and called me to ask for help. After listening to her story, I furrowed my brows. I didn't need to think too much to know that an evil ghost was behind this. As soon as it appeared, it made the talisman burn without any wind. This evil ghost had at least a ghost general realm cultivation base. It was amazing that Fong Min could endure for several days after provoking such a ghost. However, there was something I couldn't understand. That year, when I saw an energy moving around Fong Min's glabella, I was sure that old Yuan's ghost had locked onto her. Soon, she would be in trouble. After that, I could understand whether she died a violent death or was she safe and sound. However, several years later, something happened to her again. What was the reason? Was this evil ghost a new encounter, or was it a legacy of old Yuan? If it was a new encounter, although this evil ghost cultivation base wasn't ordinary, it wouldn't be difficult for me to deal with it with my current cultivation base and the evil sacrificial spirit. But if it was the legacy of old Master Yuan, who was buried in the vat, then it would be even more dangerous now. At that time, my cultivation was not high. When I heard about the vase burial, I felt that my mortal body would not be able to withstand it. In addition, when old Master Yuan died, he was already showing signs of turning into a corpse. Under these two effects, evil spirits would definitely be born. Over the years, as my cultivation has increased, I have thought about this matter many times. I only feel that the ruthlessness hidden in this matter is far greater than what I originally thought. When the old man died, he showed signs of turning into a corpse. To a large extent, it was because he was still breathing when he died and was in the state of the living dead. After that, he was buried with Buddhist rites, and his soul was difficult to disperse. At this time, his soul was in a strange state between life and death, trapped in a vat coffin. It was hard to predict what would happen. While I was deep in thought, Fong Min's voice became more sorrowful. She begged me to save her. I met Fong Min by chance in the past. Fong Min and I could be considered to have some good karma. Now that she came to me for a favor, I naturally couldn't refuse her. Moreover, I was quite interested in the evil spirit buried in the vat. Thus, I agreed on the phone and asked her to send me a detailed address. I would rush over as soon as possible. After parting with Lao AI, I planned to go to Shenzhen to prepare for the trip. Then, I would go to the royal palace in Thailand to find the Black Knight, Azanarati. However, since this had happened, I decided to postpone my trip to Thailand. After I hung up the phone, I told the evil spirit about what had happened. He didn't know anything about Buddhism, so he wasn't interested in the jar burials. If you need to go, you can go. He doesn't have any objections. While we were talking, I received Fong Min's message. I read it carefully and memorized the address. Then, I turned and headed to Min Province. Fong Min's address was in the capital of Min Province. We went all the way south. At noon the next day, we arrived in Min Province. After we got out of the car, the evil sacrificial spirit and I didn't rest. We followed Fong Min's address and found a shabby tube-shaped apartment. We went to the third floor and knocked on the door of the room Fong Min had mentioned. I had been knocking for 5 minutes, but no one came to open the door. I frowned. Is Fong Min not home? Or did something happen to her? After thinking for a while, I closed my eyes and used my divine sense to sense the room. Soon, I found someone in the room. From her aura, I knew it was Fong Min, whom I had met before. Moreover, from her aura, everything was normal. I felt strange. Why didn't she come to open the door if everything was normal? However, I soon got it. She must have been frightened by the nightmare she had experienced in the past few days. I didn't inform her before I came. That was why she didn't hear me when I knocked on the door. After figuring it out, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't bother to call her, so I directly sent her a voice transmission telling her that I was knocking on the door. Don't be afraid and come to open the door. With my current cultivation, using the sound transmission technique was nothing to me. However, Fong Min was just an ordinary person. She was probably scared out of her wits when the voice suddenly appeared next to her ear. After dawdling for another 2 minutes, she finally walked over and opened the door. After she opened the door, I saw that although Fong Min's body was still as plump as before, her aura was completely different. At this moment, her hair was disheveled, and her beautiful face had lost its color. She was wearing pajamas, which had oil stains on them. It seemed she hadn't changed her clothes for a long time. She hadn't told me how long the ghost in the dream had tortured her. However, from the looks of it, I guessed it had been at least half a month. Fong Min had changed in the past few years, and so had I. After opening the door, Fong Min gazed at me for a while. When her memories overlapped with reality, she suddenly cried. "Mr. Zhou, I don't know what to do. You have to save me." While crying, she threw herself at me and tried to get into my arms. Although I didn't care about the etiquette between men and women, I didn't mind hugging and comforting her. However, from Fong Min's expression, I knew she wanted to throw herself at me and use her beauty to entertain me. I extended my hand and stopped her. I nodded indifferently and said, "I will save you. Let's go into the room and talk about the details." Fong Min stopped and wiped her tears. Then, she turned around and invited us into the house. As soon as we entered the room, I smelled the strong smell of alcohol. The room was littered with empty bottles. Fong Min noticed my strange expression. She apologized and put the empty bottles on the sofa away. Then, she opened the window to let in some fresh air. After the smell of alcohol had dispersed, I sat down on the sofa and asked her for the details. First, I asked her about the time of the nightmare. According to Fong Min, the nightmare started at the end of last month. It had been almost a month since then. After confirming the time, I told her about Old Man Yuan's burial in the vat. I asked Fong Min to recall her nightmares to see if they were related to that incident. Hearing me mention it, Fong Min's pale face turned even paler. After a while, she said, Actually, I also think that the old man in the nightmare is a bit like the old man from the Yuan family. But it's been a few years since that happened, and I only saw his appearance after he died, so I'm not sure. I sighed. I was wondering if it was related to that incident. But now, after seeing Fong Min's face, I was sure of it. It was old man Yuan who had turned into a ghost. After several years, he found Fong Min one more time. However, this made my previous doubts even stronger. What had happened that made that evil ghost wait for years to find Fong Min? Moreover, after finding her, he didn't take her life directly. Instead, he slowly tortured her like a blunt knife, cutting her flesh. Logically speaking, Fong Min did have to bear the greatest responsibility for what had happened back then. However, emotionally speaking, Fong Min was just an outsider. Old man Yuan had to suffer because of his unfilial children and grandchildren. No matter what, he wouldn't vent his anger on Fong Min. Could it be that Fong Min had deliberately concealed some of the evil deeds she had done? With that thought in mind, I asked Fong Min to tell me what had happened that year. I also emphasized that she couldn't hide anything. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to save her life. After listening to her story, it was exactly the same as what she had told me that year. I also thought about it. Fong Min was just a guest. She didn't have any grudge against old man Yuan's family. She wouldn't have done anything that would anger the heavens. Now, I was convinced that Fong Min was telling the truth. However, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find the root of the problem. After thinking for a long time, I told Fong Min, don't worry. Tonight, I'll enter her dream and meet that old man. Ghosts could appear in people's dreams. My cultivation base wasn't lower than a young god's, so it was easy for me to enter her dream. Fong Min gawked and dropped her jaw. She couldn't imagine such a thing. When I arrived, it was already afternoon. After talking for a long time, the sky was getting dark. When Fong Min finished cooking, it was already late at night. Fong Min had been tortured for several days, and she was exhausted. She was afraid that she couldn't sleep. Now that I was here, she relaxed a lot. She lay down on the sofa and soon fell asleep. Not long after that, I saw Fong Min furrowing her brows. It seemed she had entered her dream. I nodded at the evil, sacrificial spirit, asking him to enter Fong Min's dream with me to see what was going on. Of course, the evil, sacrificial spirit didn't refuse. However, he wasn't in a hurry. He waved his hand and arranged a thick barrier that covered the entire room. At this moment, we were in a strange place, so we had to be careful. I didn't think about this. However, the evil sacrificial spirit was meticulous. After he had set up the barrier, the two of us simultaneously placed our hands on Fong Min's forehead. Then, we closed our eyes and connected our consciousness to Fong Min's dream. As soon as we entered, I lifted my head and saw a figure shrouded in layers of mist. However, no matter how hard I tried to look, I couldn't see it clearly. It was obvious that my cultivation base couldn't break through the mist protecting the evil ghost's body. At first, I thought that this ghost only had a ghost general cultivation base. But now, it seemed I had underestimated it. Fortunately, the evil sacrificial spirit was here. I didn't waste my time and turned to ask the evil sacrificial spirit, "How strong is this ghost?" The evil sacrificial spirit answered me. "This ghost has the power of the peak of the Yang God realm." Peak of the Yang God realm. Hearing these words, I couldn't help but be startled. It was much harder for ghosts to cultivate than for living people. It had only been a few years since Grandpa Yuan had been buried, but he had reached such a realm. I had never heard of such a thing before. At this moment, the evil spirit also noticed us. The figure shrouded in the mist turned to look at us and asked in a sinister voice, "Who are you?" Of course, the evil sacrificial spirit didn't pay attention to him. I thought for a while then said, "Ghosts have their own paths, and people have their own paths." What happened to Grandpa that year was related to Fong Min's mishandling of the matter, but it has been so many years. He should have let it go. Why did he cause trouble again today? I asked this question because I wanted to know the reason and to confirm the old man's identity. Fong Min hadn't told me the details, so I wasn't sure yet. At this moment, The evil spirit lifted his leg and walked out of the fog, and his cold voice sounded, "Why do I need to explain my actions to you?" I was bewildered when I heard his answer. He seemed to have admitted his identity, but why did he call himself this old monk? Before I could figure it out, his figure emerged from the mist. The first thing I saw was a big, shiny head. Old man Yuan's evil spirit had a bald head, and there were several scars on it. Counting them carefully, there were at least 9 of them. As far as I knew, besides the Tantra ceremony, Buddhists also had the heart-cleansing ceremony. After they entered the temple and studied for a while, the old monk would use incense to light the first scar on their monk's head. It was called the heart-cleansing ceremony. Then, in the next 1 or 2 years, if their performance was good, they would receive a second scar, which was called le fu. Generally speaking, if everything went well, the senior monks in the temple could have 5 or 6 scars, while the abbots of important temples could have 8 or 9 scars. Chapter 798. While I was puzzled, old Yuan walked past me and stared at the evil, sacrificial spirit standing 1 step behind me. Then his face changed. Without saying a word, he turned around and returned to the mist, disappearing in just a blink of an eye. I hurried to chase after him. However, not only old Yuan, but even the mist around him had disappeared. But strangely, at the place where the mist dispersed, I actually faintly noticed a fluctuation that was a mixture of shaman qi and Tao qi. This feeling was truly too familiar because I cultivated both shaman qi and Tao qi at the same time. But at the same time, I was extremely shocked because I knew very well that this aura wasn't emanated from my body, but the aura left behind by the mist around old man Yuan. I wasn't sure, so I asked the evil sacrificial spirit to come and sense it. Apparently, he had also sensed this aura. He frowned in surprise. At this moment, I didn't know what to do. I shook my head and didn't want to think about it. I asked the evil sacrificial spirit to leave Fong Min's dream. When we got out, Fong Min hadn't woken up yet. However, her twisted face had calmed down. She had been tortured for a long time, so of course, she was tired. We didn't wake her up and just sat there, talking about the aura we had sensed in her dream. Tao energy was common, and I wouldn't be surprised if I sensed it on anyone. However, shaman energy was different. Including me, Tai, the number of people I knew who cultivated shaman energy in this world could be counted on one hand. Not many people cultivated shaman energy, so how could this ghost have shaman energy cultivation base? Was it a coincidence that he had absorbed shaman energy from somewhere? If that was the case, it could be explained. However, besides shaman energy, he also had the aura of Tao energy. Could he be like me and cultivate shaman energy and Tao energy at the same time? It was impossible. Although shaman energy and Tao energy had the same origin, they couldn't be cultivated at the same time. Because of my special identity, even if this ghost had a great opportunity, it couldn't be the same as mine. I didn't know what was going on, so I turned to ask the evil, sacrificial spirit to see what he had to say. The evil, sacrificial spirit kept silent for a while and then said hesitantly, "That ghost's aura doesn't seem to be the power of the origin. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to wander around. It was very likely that he had absorbed both sorcerer qi and Tao qi from somewhere, and that was why he had ended up like this." His theory was similar to my guess, but I didn't know what was going on. I had to wait for Fong Min to wake up and ask her to see if I could get any useful information. This wait lasted for several hours. When Fong Min woke up, it was already the next morning. I heard some noises, so I pulled myself out from my cultivation. When I opened my eyes, I saw that Fong Min looked much better than before. After she woke up, I asked her, "Tao, did you see anything strange in your dream?" With the two of us here, Fong Min's dream was naturally different from before. But after she repeated it, it was exactly the same as what we saw last night, and there was nothing unusual. Fong Min was just an ordinary person and could not sense the aura of Tao witchcraft. Asking her this question was like asking for fish from a tree. I thought for a while and decided to change the angle. I asked her to tell me everything that had happened after old Yuan had been buried that year. For old man Yuan to have such an aura, it was naturally a good fortune after his death. Perhaps he could find some clues from what happened after his death. When he had asked Fong Min to recount what had happened in the past, he had mainly talked about what had happened when old man Yuan had been buried. As for what had happened after the burial, he had not gone into detail. Seeing my serious expression, Fong Min didn't dare to ask more. She thought for a moment, then started to talk. The result was the same as what I had heard about old Yuan punishing his children and grandchildren. After that, Fong Min told me that she also felt restless because of what I had said to her on the train. Next year, when we arrived in Fuzhou, although she no longer worked as a receptionist, she still went to old Yuan's grave and kowtowed to ask for forgiveness. She burned joss sticks, candles, and paper money, begging for old Yuan's forgiveness. After that, she also paid attention to old Yuan's house. In addition to old man Yuan's eldest son breaking his leg, in the following months, a lot of things happened to the younger generation of his family, but none of them were life-threatening. Apparently, old Yuan had punished his unfilial descendants. Although it didn't look serious, Fong Min was scared that ghosts were involved. She had even prepared herself to be punished. However, nothing happened as time went by. After a long time, she finally calmed down. She thought that old Yuan hadn't taken his revenge on her. Now, she understood that she hadn't been able to hide from him. Old Yuan had come to find her. At this point, Fong Min's tears streamed down her face. Her entire body was trembling. It was obvious that she was recalling what had happened in the past few days. I could see that after 1 month of torture, Fong Min's mind was on the verge of collapse. If she hadn't found me, she would have gone crazy soon. Old Yuan wouldn't have needed to do anything to her. Seeing her in such a state, I couldn't ask more questions. I had to comfort her. It took me a while to calm her down. After Fong Min had calmed down, I went to discuss with the evil, sacrificial spirit. This time we had an idea. Since we couldn't get any information from Fong Min, we had to go to old Yuan's grave to check. If he had changed after his death, there should be some clues left in his grave. With that thought, I felt excited. Because I am the product of the union between monster monarch puppet and emperor Ku, I am able to dual cultivate in witchcraft and Taoism. Regardless of the reason for this old man Yuan, he possesses both Taoist Qi and witchcraft Qi at the same time. It makes me feel that I am not alone. This trip to Min province was the right choice. After making up my mind, I told Fong Min that if we wanted to solve this, we had to go to old Yuan's grave. When Fong Min heard me, her face paled. She was scared of old Yuan's tomb. However, she gritted her teeth and nodded. She understood that fear couldn't solve anything. Eventually, she would have to face it. It was still early, so we didn't want to linger. After breakfast, we left for old Yuan's village. After that incident, Fong Min had changed jobs. Moreover, she was scared after the incident, so she had moved to another place. Her current place was quite far from old Yuan's village. On the way, we didn't mention the incident again. We deliberately talked about some relaxing topics. However, Fong Min's tense nerves couldn't relax. The more we talked about old Yuan's grave. Around dusk, we finally reached old Yuan's village. After we got out of the car, we didn't go to old Yuan's house. Fong Min knew where old Yuan was buried, so she took us directly to his grave. As soon as we reached the grave, I felt a wisp of yin energy in the air. Without waiting for Fong Min to speak, I pointed at a barren grave around 10 meters away from us. Old Yuan's grave should be over there, right? We were surrounded by a graveyard. Besides old man Yuan's grave, there were 7 or 8 other graves. Fong Min was amazed and nodded repeatedly when I confirmed it. The yin energy in the air mainly came from that grave. Moreover, there wasn't any grass growing on the grave, which was a sign of thick yin energy. I didn't need to think too much to know that this was old Yuan's grave. We quickened our pace and stopped in front of old Yuan's grave. Out of instinct, I walked around the grave a few times to observe the geomancy of the surroundings. There was neither good sand nor good water around the grave. The layout wasn't good, but it didn't look dangerous. It was just an ordinary grave. There was nothing strange about it. However, There were some rolling stones in the grass not far from the grave, which piqued my interest. Those stones had the same shape and size, and they were arranged in a certain way. I walked around the area and sensed the aura. Gradually, I understood something. Those stones weren't rolling stones. They were arranged around old Yuan's grave, creating a simple scattering formation. It seemed the descendants of the Yuan family had found someone to deal with this matter after they had encountered a disaster. Moreover, they were lucky that the geomancy master they had found wasn't a swindler. Although this scattering formation was simple, it was very practical. It could disperse the energy in the grave. Normally, with the scattering formation to disperse energy, even if there were ghosts in the grave, they wouldn't be able to cause a big commotion. However, in old Yuan's grave, the stones of the scattering formation were covered in moss. It had been some time, but it was incredible that old Yuan's soul had cultivated to the peak of Yang God realm. I walked to the grave and rubbed the soil on it. Normally, soil that had been soaked in energy for years should be very hard, just like the wall outside the energy passage in the corpse sect. However, the soil on old Yuan's grave was soft, and its color was the same as the surrounding soil. It looked like the qi had been almost dispersed by the dispersing array. The more I looked at it, the more I couldn't understand it. There were many strange things about old Yuan's grave. I asked Feng Min to stand in the distance while I discussed with the evil, sacrificial spirit. The evil, sacrificial spirit waved his hand and shook his head. If we can't see it from the outside, let's look inside. Then he swung his hand. A wisp of spirit energy emerged from his sleeve and turned into a sharp blade. He slashed the soil under his feet, creating a 10-centimeter gap. Chapter 799. As soon as the crack appeared, I instantly sensed the presence of the true dragon qi. When I got closer, I was even more certain that the true dragon qi was drifting out from the crack. Moreover, it was incomparably pure. It seemed that there was a true dragon vein hidden in the tomb. I couldn't help but turn to look at the evil, sacrificial spirit. I had been observing Old Man Yuan's tomb for a long time, but I could only sense a little bit of energy. However, the evil sacrificial spirit had directly created a crack. It was obvious that he had sensed the existence of the true dragon qi inside. My cultivation base wasn't as high as the evil, sacrificial spirits. Moreover, living people in the secular world would inevitably have vulgar air and negative karma. The evil sacrificial spirit was an soul that had been refined by the 9 serenities' blood. It had long gotten rid of its negative karma, so it was normal that its perception wasn't as good as the evil sacrificial spirits. Since its perception was strong, I directly asked it if there was a true dragon vein under this tomb. After hearing my question, the evil sacrificial spirit didn't hesitate and directly shook his head. I frowned and pondered for a while. I agreed with his answer. True dragon veins were rare in this world, and the geomancy of a place where a true dragon vein could be found must be marvelous. I had checked the geomancy of this tomb, and it was very ordinary. It didn't have the conditions to produce a true dragon vein. Moreover, the true dragon qi in this crack had an ethereal feeling, which was completely different from the true dragon qi I had seen before. From this point, I could rule out the possibility of a true dragon vein below. If it were someone else, they wouldn't dare to judge a true dragon vein based on their feelings. However, I was different. I had seen more true dragon veins than ordinary young god celestial masters. Especially when I was in the Blessed Enclave, the 4 true dragon veins of the Wangwu Wonderland were available for me to cultivate at any time. When the true dragon veins of the Blessed Enclave were redistributed, I had plucked several hundred true dragon veins and kept a lot of them. Thus, I was very familiar with the true dragon veins. After confirming that there was no true dragon vein below, I began to have doubts. If there was no true dragon vein, where did such pure true dragon qi come from? I recalled that when I was in the Langi platform, there was also the true dragon qi under the underground palace. At that time, I mistakenly thought that there was a true dragon vein below, but after I got there, I found that the Imperial Seal only had a large amount of true dragon chi. The current situation was quite similar to that of the Langya platform. It was very likely that some kind of artifact that contained a large amount of true dragon chi was also buried below. But if that was the case, I couldn't understand it. This place was different from the Langya stage. It was not a place of immortals, but merely the tomb of Old Man Yuan. According to Fong Min's description, Old Man Yuan's soul had lingered after his death, and he had unintentionally used the Buddhist burial technique. There were no rare treasures involved at all, excluding the fact that it was naturally formed and rare treasures. There was only one explanation for the true dragon chi here. It must have been deliberately created by someone. In other words, someone must have intentionally injected the true dragon chi into the tomb. Old Man Yuan's change must have something to do with it. According to this conjecture, everything was much easier to explain. They were just being manipulated by someone. But even so, I still had a question in my mind. Previously, in Fong Min's dream, Old Man Yuan's body clearly emitted the dual aura of Dao Qi and Sorcerer Qi. At this time, there was only the true dragon Qi here, but no Sorcerer Qi. Why was it so? I thought about it. Old Man Yuan was Yin's soul, and he cultivated some techniques similar to the divine connecting technique that I had taught Tong Tong. I could understand that. But the Sorcerer Qi was different. It couldn't be improved through cultivation. It could only be obtained from the rare Tai Sui's corpse. Old Man Yuan's cultivation base was definitely related to this tomb. However, there was no Sorcerer Qi in this tomb, and it was impossible for the Tai Sui to exist. So, where did the Sorcerer Qi on his body come from? Could it be that the true dragon Qi from this crack could be transformed into Sorcerer Qi? Speaking of this, I suddenly remembered the great formation in Wangwu Cave that could transform true dragon Qi into Sorcerer Qi. But soon I shook my head. There was indeed such a formation in the Wangwu Grotto Heaven. However, that formation was set up by the Wang family's ancestor with the power of an immortal. When it was converted, it even used the power of 4 true dragon veins. Compared to 4 true dragon veins, this bit of true dragon Qi could not even be mentioned in the same breath. Moreover, I couldn't explain the 9 ring scars on Old Man Yuan's head. No matter if it was the true dragon veins or the Sorcerer Qi, they had nothing to do with Buddhism. So, where did he get those ring scars? After pondering for a long time, I couldn't figure it out. Right at this moment, the sound of chanting came from a distance. Since Old Man Yuan looked like a monk, I was very sensitive to the sound of chanting. I stopped thinking and turned to look at the source of the sound. The source of the sound was the Yuan family village where Old Man Yuan lived. After listening carefully for a while, I recognized that it was the original vow scripture of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva that I had chanted in the Spirit Lock Tower to help the twin Rakshasas. It was obvious that someone had passed away in the Yuan family village. Old Man Yuan's soul was stirring up trouble, and someone had passed away in the Yuan family village. It was hard not to connect the two events. After thinking for a while, I decided to go there to check to see if the two events were related. I asked the evil sacrificial spirit to go there with me. As for Fong Min, it wasn't convenient for her to follow us. I asked her to wait in the car. Fong Min was smart. She didn't ask what we were going to do. She turned around and left. I took the evil sacrificial spirit along the small path to the village. It was late at night, and the people in the village didn't have many activities to entertain themselves. All the houses had closed their doors. The gate of the courtyard where the Buddhist chants came from was also closed. An exorcism talisman was hung on the gate. If an exorcism talisman was hung on the gate, it was highly possible that something evil had happened. The evil sacrificial spirit and I exchanged looks. Then we soared into the air and landed on the roof. In the dark of the night, no one would notice us. After standing still, I'll lower my head to look at the courtyard. There was a coffin in the middle of the courtyard. The custom here was similar to that in my hometown. Before the funeral, the coffin wasn't sealed. That was why we could see the deceased's face from above. The deceased was a man in his prime. However, it was strange that his face was covered in wrinkles, as if his spirit energy had been sucked away. The first thing I thought of was old Yuan. However, I wasn't sure. The evil sacrificial spirit told me that old Yuan was at the peak of the yang god realm. With his cultivation base, sucking the spirit energy of ordinary people was just a drop in the bucket. It was better for him to meditate and cultivate. It was strange. With that thought in mind, I turned to look at the memorial tablet in front of the coffin. Usually, before a funeral, the memorial tablet of the deceased was made of yellow paper with the date of birth and the time of death written on it. After the coffin fell to the ground, the memorial tablet would be burned. It would accompany the deceased to the netherworld. It was a kind of identification. Looking at the deceased's birth date and time of death, I subconsciously calculated. Soon, I got a strange answer. The deceased's 5 elements were all fire, and he died around noon. His element was also fire. As such, I seem to have found some clues. Could it be that old man Yuan sucked this person here for the fire attribute? After this discovery, I checked around. However, I didn't find anything valuable. I decided to leave with the evil, sacrificial spirit. When we returned to the car, Fong Min was sleeping in the back seat. However, she was whimpering and screaming. Apparently, she had a nightmare. The evil sacrificial spirit and I exchanged looks. Immediately, we placed our hands on Fong Min's forehead. Old Yuan came at the right time. We had a lot of questions that we wanted to ask him. As we had entered this place once, the evil sacrificial spirit and I were familiar with the place. Soon, we reached Fong Min's dream. As soon as we stood still, we saw old Yuan not far from us. This time, he wasn't shrouded in mist like the last time. However, before I could ask him anything, I was surprised. When she saw him yesterday, there were only 9 ring scars on his head. But today, there was 1 more, and it became a total of 10. At the same time, old Yuan's aura seemed to be stronger than the day before. Looking at the 10 scars, I had a flash of inspiration. I remembered the Bodhisattva precepts I had read in the ancient Buddhist scriptures. As far as I knew, the Bodhisattva precept were one of the 7 precepts. Upasai, Upa-e, Sami, Samini, Shikikamuni, Bhikkhu, and Bhikkhuni. The Bodhisattva's identity could be within the 7 precepts, but it could also be outside of the 7. The reason why the Bodhisattva precepts was that it covered and surpassed all the other precepts. According to the Buddhist scriptures, the Bodhisattva precepts were the origin of all Buddhas, the foundation of Bodhisattva, and the foundation of all Buddhas. The nature of the Bodhisattva precepts was similar to the 8 precepts. The 8 precepts were also a kind of liberation precepts outside of the 7 precepts. However, the Bodhisattva precepts were similar to the 8 precepts. Simply speaking, the Bodhisattva precepts were the highest symbol of Buddhism. The most obvious feature was the 12 scars on the forehead. Once a Buddhist had 12 scars on the forehead, it meant that he wasn't far from becoming a Buddha. Did old Yuan cultivate the Bodhisattva precepts? In just one day, he had 1 scar. It was hard to say what would happen next. When he had 12 scars, I was afraid that even the evil priest spirit wouldn't be his match. With that thought in mind, I immediately asked the evil priest spirit to capture him. I didn't expect that old man Yuan would be so vigilant. He disappeared before I could finish my sentence. Even with the evil priest spirit's power, he couldn't capture him in a hurry. Feeling helpless, the 2 of us had to leave Fong Min's dream. We sat in the car and began to think about this matter. Although old man Yuan is a ghost, his cultivation process is no different from that of ordinary people. With his cultivation at the peak of the yang spirit realm, it is extremely difficult for him to make further progress. The reason why his cultivation improved overnight is likely to have something to do with the person with the fire attribute we saw before. I told the evil priest spirit about my speculation, but the evil priest spirit shook his head. I was bewildered and thought that I was wrong. However, the evil priest spirit told me that he had the same idea as me. However, I had overlooked one thing. Old Yuan's aura had indeed increased, but it was only his shaman energy that had increased. His Tao energy, on the other hand, had weakened a lot. His shaman energy had increased, but his Tao energy had weakened. If the evil priest spirit hadn't reminded me, I wouldn't have noticed this. Now that I thought about it, it was indeed the case. However, my train of thought, which had just been smoothed out, became muddled again. How could it be? Even a man corpse with a fire element didn't have anything to do with shaman energy. How could old Yuan increase his cultivation base? Or could it be that old Yuan's increase in power had nothing to do with a man corpse? Chapter 800. While I was thinking, more than 2 hours had passed. It was late at night, and the village had quieted down. There was no place to investigate. After we had driven old man Yuan away, Fong Min was sleeping soundly. I called her twice, but she didn't wake up. I decided not to go back and stayed in the carriage with the evil, sacrificial spirit. While I was cultivating, time flew. Soon, it was the morning of the next day. Fong Min hadn't woken up yet, so I sat cross-legged in the carriage and didn't move. However, while I was cultivating, I spread my spiritual sense. I soon noticed a group of monks at the entrance of the village. They were hurrying toward Yuan family village. I felt strange. Last night, that person had been chanting the Ksitigarbha original vow scripture for most of the night. That person's soul had already been purified. Why were there more monks coming? Could it be that something had happened again? With that thought in mind, I got up and called the evil sacrificial spirit to follow them. When we got close, I saw that the leader of this group of monks was a fat monk with a big body. His eyebrows and beard were glowing, and there was a faint Buddhist halo protecting his body. His cultivation base seemed to be at the glory of consciousness realm. In the secular world, a monk with the cultivation of Shi Yao could completely be called a virtuous and eminent monk. In this small Yuan family village, even if there was a ghost that harmed people, it would normally not be able to invite such a virtuous and eminent monk. Could it be that something extraordinary had happened again? With that thought in my mind, I hurried to follow them with the evil sacrificial spirit. We didn't hide our tracks, and the fat monk in the glory of consciousness realm quickly noticed the two of us. He immediately stopped in his tracks and checked our bodies. Of course, he couldn't recognize the evil sacrificial spirit's cultivation base. I thought for a moment and released my glory of consciousness realm cultivation base. The fat monk looked at me for a few seconds and was surprised. He hurried to walk toward us. When he was in front of us, he clasped his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. His face looked solemn. Although monk Miaojiwa's incident had happened, I didn't have any prejudice against Buddhists. Seeing him greet me, I also clasped my hands to return the greeting. The fat monk saw my behavior, and the solemn expression on his face disappeared. He asked, "This poor monk's Buddhist name is Mingjue. Benefactors, what brings you here?" This monk Mingju is quite smart. He can tell with a glance that we are following him on purpose. With my cultivation level, I can be Monk Mingju Sr., not to mention offering sacrifices to evil spirits. That was why I didn't try to hide anything. I simply told him that I was here to investigate the case of Een spirits harming people. Of course, the matter of true dragon energy and shaman energy was a sensitive topic, so I didn't mention it. Then I asked Monk Mingju, why did they come here in such a hurry? When Monk Mingju heard this, he stepped aside and signaled for us to walk together. As they walked, they spoke of the purpose of their trip and the situation they had already grasped. According to Monk Mingju, 3 people had died in the same way in the 8 villages. All 3 of them had died in the same way. All of them had their essence energy sucked away by ghosts. However, the 3 of them were of different genders and ages, and there was no interaction between them at all. It was as if there was no connection between them. So he thought that the ghost was just doing whatever it wanted to do. In order to prevent more people from getting hurt, he had to go down the mountain and walk around, trying to subdue the ghost. Until yesterday, his disciples sent him a letter saying that there were people who died in the same way here. That was why he had rushed here overnight and didn't dare to linger. Since Monk Mingju was in such a hurry, I thought he already knew the cause of the incident. But now, besides knowing that 3 people had died, he didn't know anything else. I didn't hurry to tell him my guess. Instead, I asked him if he had checked the birthdays of the 3 people who had died. According to my previous guess, those 3 people also had pure elemental fate, and they were killed at the same time. However, it was just my guess. Moreover, I didn't have any clues that could directly connect the scar on the old man's forehead to these things. Monk Mingju was surprised when he heard my question. He didn't seem to understand why I'd asked him that. However, he quickly answered, I didn't see those corpses, so I didn't pay attention to their birthdays. I just wanted to help them ascend to the afterlife before leaving. He hesitated for a while before telling me that he hadn't sensed the existence of the 3 souls when he had helped the souls ascend to the afterlife. Normally, after a person died, the 3 souls would leave the body, but they wouldn't disappear immediately. They would wait until the 7th day of the afterlife before entering the netherworld to reincarnate. Monk Mingju understood this problem. He had gone to ascend to the afterlife before the 7th day of the afterlife. I didn't see the 3 souls before the 7th day of the afterlife. Moreover, I could confirm that old Yuan hadn't just absorbed the energy of those people. He had swallowed the 3 souls at the same time. Was it possible that swallowing the 3 souls had something to do with old Yuan's witchcraft energy? I thought for a while, but I couldn't think of any connection between the two. While I was deep in thought, we arrived at the yard where the corpses were located the night before. The host seemed to know that Monk Mingju was coming. At this moment, he had already prepared a vegetarian meal. He hurried to invite the monks to enter the house and eat. However, when the monks entered, the host was surprised to see me and the evil sacrificial spirit. He didn't know who we were. Monk Mingju smiled and explained to the host, "We're experts who have come to solve this matter." This fat monk seemed to have a high prestige. When the host heard him, he was also shocked. He hurried to greet us and led us to the main seats. With my and the evil spirit's cultivation base, we didn't need to be polite with Monk Mingju. We sat on the main seats. The food of a farmer's family was also delicious. After eating, Monk Mingju got up and said that he wanted to check the corpse first. While walking to the morgue, we asked about the situation when the deceased died. According to the host, the deceased was his younger brother, who had the same mother as him. He was still in his 20s and hadn't gotten married yet. That day, he was the only one at home. When they returned home in the evening, they found his brother lying in the yard. He had been dead for a long time. That was why no one had seen how his brother had died. The evil spirit and I had come to check the corpse last night, so we didn't pay much attention to it. We casually glanced at the corpse. Who would have thought that we would find something? The corpse seemed to be filled with a Buddhist aura. This aura was very weak, and we didn't notice it last night. If we hadn't noticed Monk Mingju's Buddhist power when we first saw him, I would have missed it again. I turned to look at Monk Mingju. His face didn't change. It seemed he hadn't noticed it yet. As a Buddhist, he should be more sensitive to Buddhist power than I was. However, his cultivation base was too low, so it was normal that he couldn't detect this weak aura. At this moment, Monk Mingju's eyes moved away from the corpse. He turned to me and asked, "Did you find anything?" Old Yuan had a ring scar on his head, which made him look like a monk. The corpse also had a Buddhist aura. Moreover, the people who had come to help the corpse were also a group of monks. Under such a complicated situation, I couldn't help but think that Buddhist people might be involved in this. To make things worse, I wondered if Monk Mingju was related to old Yuan. After hesitating for a while, I shook my head. I didn't tell him what I had found. Monk Mingju saw that I didn't pay attention to him, but he didn't mind. He turned around and continued to talk to the host. "Have there been any strange incidents around the village?" After listening to me, the host pondered for a while. He looked hesitant, as if something strange had happened. Seeing this, I immediately focused on him and listened to what he was saying. According to him, on the day of his brother's death, he was working in the field when he suddenly heard the sound of a bell. It lasted for a few seconds before it stopped. At that time, he was very puzzled. There was no temple nearby. How could he hear the sound of a bell? Moreover, the sound of the bell was strange. It was as if it was ringing right next to his ear, and it was frighteningly loud. However, he was in the middle of the field at that time, and there was no temple or house around. At that time, he thought that he was just too tired and had an auditory hallucination. He didn't think too much about it. Who would have thought that when he got home, he would see his brother's corpse. After listening to him, Monk Ming-ju was bewildered. He frowned and muttered, "The bell?" While talking, he suddenly lost his composure. He hurriedly asked, "How many times did the bell ring?" His question stunned the host. The host rolled his eyes and began to count seriously with his fingers as he tried to recall. After more than a minute, he stopped and answered uncertainly about 10 times. As soon as he said that, Monk Ming-ju became excited. He continued to ask, "Did you hear the chanting of scriptures again?" This time the host shook his head. "I didn't hear the chanting of scriptures." After listening to him, Monk Ming-ju was still excited. His body shivered, and he muttered, "Living Buddha, a living Buddha has come to this world." While talking, his face turned from shock to joy. He put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. His actions confused me, and I didn't know what he was trying to do. After he calmed down, I frowned and asked him about it. Chapter 801. Buddhists were very particular about ringing the bell. Temples used the bell to perform Buddhist services, summon monks to the main hall, chant sutras, and do homework. In addition, they used the bell to signal waking up, sleeping, and eating. That was why the bell was rung differently for different purposes. However, ringing the bell was also very particular. In the 100 Zhang monastic rules, magical tools, it said, the big bell is the beginning of the forest's signal. Striking at dawn breaks the long night, alerting people to sleep. Striking at dusk makes them feel dizzy. That was why ringing the bell at dawn and dusk required 108 consecutive strikes. 108 strikes were related to the word 9, which had a very high and auspicious meaning. 12 times the word 9 was 108, which pushed the concept of 9 to the extreme. The Buddhist bell was used to pray, influence, and release sentient beings from the afterlife. The temple's bell was rung once in the morning and once at dusk. Each time, it would be rung 18 times, then another 18 times. This repeated twice for a total of 108 times. Whether it was for Buddhist services or homework, as long as the bell was rung, one had to chant sutras. However, there was only one situation that didn't apply that way. During the advancement, there couldn't be any noise in the temple. The temple had to wait for the Buddha's blessing. That was why Monk Ming-ju had asked if the bell was accompanied by the chanting of sutras. As for why he was so surprised and even mumbled something, it was because when a Buddhist disciple advanced, the bell would ring 9 times at most, which corresponded to the monk scar on his forehead. It also represented his status in the temple. If the bell rang 9 times or more, that person would have the power to become a bodhisattva, and the day he would become a Buddha was just around the corner. After listening to Monk Ming-ju's explanation and recalling the 10 scars on old Yuan's forehead, I was almost certain that the bell the master heard was related to old Yuan. The Buddhist aura on the corpse, the bell rang 10 times, and the 10 scars on old Yuan's forehead. It wasn't a coincidence. I was afraid I had to find the answer in old Yuan's grave. Fang Min had told me the whole story. Although old Yuan had come out to do evil, he was just an ordinary person. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to touch his grave. However, I didn't have any other way to solve the situation, so I had to resort to this method. There was no time to waste. After making up my mind, I called the evil spirit and returned to the graveyard. When Monk Ming-ju saw me move, he didn't hesitate and chased after me. However, before he could get far, the sacrificial evil spirit stopped in his tracks. He frowned and stood on the spot. I was surprised and thought that he had found something. I hurried to ask him. However, the evil spirit told me that he had sensed something strange happening in Chiyo's tomb. He needed to go back and check. I knew how important Chiyo's tomb was to the sacrificial evil spirit. Although I was surprised, I nodded and asked him to go back as soon as possible. As for Mr. Yuan, although he is at the peak of the Yang spirit realm, the cultivation of ghosts is slightly lower than that of people in the same realm. I have the help of Tong and the snake spirit, so I can fight against Mr. Yuan. Seeing me nod, the evil spirit nodded and told me to be careful. Then, he flashed and disappeared into thin air. When Monk Ming-ju saw the sacrificial evil spirit's methods, his eyes widened in fear. It took him a while to recover, but he didn't dare to ask anything. His eyes were filled with surprise. I called him and continued to walk toward our destination. When we arrived, Monk Ming-ju looked around for a long time. Since the crack the sacrificial evil spirit had created yesterday was still there, he quickly noticed the true dragon energy that was drifting out of it. If one directly absorbed the true dragon energy, it would become the Tao energy that the Taoist and mystical sects talked about. However, for Buddhists, the cultivation power was Buddha power. Monk Ming-ju asked me curiously, why is there Buddhist power surging out of this tomb? I shook my head and told him that it's true dragon energy, which mostly comes from the true dragon's vein. Unexpectedly, Monk Ming-ju shook his head. I have good friends from the Taoist and mystical sections. They know about the true dragon's vein. However, the aura that's coming out of this crack isn't true dragon energy. It's the Buddha power of our Buddhist sect. Then, he explained to me in detail that the Buddha power was neutral and calm. It was the purest Buddha power, which was basically the same as the true dragon energy. That's why people who weren't Buddhist disciples would confuse the two. After listening to him, I understood. No wonder I had felt the Buddha aura in this crack. It turned out that the aura that was coming out of this place was Buddha power. When I heard this, I would have been even more surprised. However, considering what I had seen earlier, the Buddha power wasn't strange. Monk Ming-ju had told me that Old Man Yuan was about to become a bodhisattva. It was normal for the Buddha power to come out of the tomb. Previously, I had concealed this matter from Monk Ming-ju. But now that the sacrificial evil spirit had left, I didn't have anyone to talk to. After thinking for a while, I decided to tell him everything. After listening to me, Monk Ming-ju was dumbstruck. After keeping silent for a while, he said in a trembling voice, "Could it be that this ghost wants to become a bodhisattva?" It sounded ridiculous for a ghost to become a bodhisattva, but from all the signs, it seemed to be the only explanation. However, Buddhism was a peaceful and merciful place. This ghost had killed many people. Even if he became a bodhisattva, he wouldn't be able to wash away his sins. Monk Ming-ju agreed with me. He nodded and saluted me. Merciful Buddha, the bodhisattva ghost is recorded in our Buddhist scriptures. It's a taboo in our Buddhist sect, and the Lord Buddha won't forgive him. As a Buddhist disciple, I have the responsibility to help him ascend to the afterlife. However, my power is limited. I hope that you can help me eradicate this evil creature. That was the reason I had come here. I hurried to stop Ming-ju. You don't need to be so polite. After talking to him, we prepared to dig the grave and find out the truth. However, after I told him my plan, Monk Ming-ju didn't agree. Digging up someone's grave is a big deal. We can't do it rashly. We have to ask for Old Man Yuan's descendants' permission. Although it sounded stubborn, I nodded in agreement after thinking for a while. We didn't dig up the grave, but headed to the Yuan village to find Old Man Yuan's descendant. I had to ask Fong Min which family Old Yuan's descendants belonged to. However, before I could go to the car to call her, Fong Min suddenly got out of the car. She looked panic-stricken and staggered toward me. When she reached me, she was panting and couldn't speak for a long time. After she calmed down, I asked her what happened. Fong Min grabbed my sleeve and cried for help. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Seeing her like that, I guessed that Old Man Yuan had come to find her again. After asking around, it was indeed the case. Fong Min said, "When I woke up today, the car was so dark that I couldn't even see my own fingers. I didn't know if it was a dream or reality. Old Man Yuan suddenly appeared. This time, he told me that he would come to take her life at 6 p.m. tomorrow." Then, Fong Min got on her knees. She cried and begged me to save her. I pulled her up and comforted her. I promised her that nothing bad would happen to her. Eventually, she calmed down and took us to the Yuan village. Along the way, I thought about what Fong Min had told me. I was surprised. Old Man Yuan had come to see Fong Min again after so many years. However, he had only scared her in her dreams. He hadn't hurt her at all. Why did he suddenly attack her? Moreover, not only did he want to kill her, but he also told me the time. Why? Tomorrow at 6 o'clock p.m. Is there something special about this time? Thinking about this, I suddenly had a flash of inspiration. I realized something very important. Although I had only seen the time of death of the previous victim, I guessed that the time of death of the previous victims was the same as my own fate. Old Man Yuan had told me the time to take her life. It seemed he had been waiting for this day for more than half a month. Then, I began to calculate the time of tomorrow at 6 o'clock p.m. After that, I understood Old Man Yuan's plan. Tomorrow would be a Yin day. At 6 o'clock p.m., it would be the hour of the rooster. The hour of the rooster belonged to the Yin year and the Yin month. It was a Yin year, a Yin month, a Yin day, and a Yin hour. After calculating this, I asked Fong Min to tell me her birth date and 8 characters. Seeing how serious I was, she didn't dare to neglect and quickly told me. As she spoke, I started to calculate. After she finished, I had an answer in my heart. Fong Min's birth matrix was of the water element, and water was Yin. If Old Master Yuan really succeeded tomorrow, Fong Min would die a violent death. Those who died a violent death were full of resentment, not to mention the fact that 6 o'clock tomorrow afternoon was the Yin year, Yin month, Yin day, Yin hour. Coupled with Fong Min's extremely Yin fate, he would probably be filled with resentment. It seemed that Old Master Yuan had his eyes on her for a reason, and he had left her for last. Fong Min must be the most important person. Old Master Yuan did not have a trace of Yin Qi on him, so the souls of these people were definitely not meant to be consumed. They should be used for other purposes. In an instant, I thought of something. The 5 people chosen by Old Man Yuan all had single elemental birth providences, representing the purest power of the 5 elements. The 5 elements of Yin and Yang originated from the Taoist theory of Yin and Yang. All things were divided into Yin and Yang, and Yin and Yang gave birth to Tao. Tao begets 1, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets all things. Yin and Yang could be transformed into each other, and at the same time, the two were interdependent. Moreover, Old Master Yuan had turned into a Buddhist monk. Both Buddhism and Taoism could lead to enlightenment. Since Old Master Yuan had collected the power of Yin and Yang and the 5 elements, did he want to use the dead energy to feed the living energy and reverse Yin and Yang to be reborn? I was startled. Old Master Yuan's real purpose wasn't to become a ghost bodhisattva. He wanted to comprehend the Tao and become a Buddha after being reborn. If that was the case, everything that had happened could be explained. However, I couldn't understand the shaman energy in Old Master Yuan's body. I had never heard of a Buddhist cultivator becoming a Buddha by cultivating shaman energy. When I thought about the connection between Buddhism and shaman energy, I suddenly thought of someone. A few years ago, in the exchange competition in Shenzhen, there was a Thai black-clothed Asian called Arati. He told me that I was the son of heaven and that the shaman energy in my body was the power of 9 spirits. At that time, I thought that the power of 9 spirits referred to the Tai Sui. Moreover, the grand palace he lived in also worshipped the power of 9 spirits. In other words, the grand palace worshipped a Tai Sui. The Thai monks worshipped the power of shaman energy. From this point of view, Buddhism and shaman energy had a close connection. The Buddhism in our country was a foreign force. Moreover, it had only been 1,000 years since then, and the period of the witchcraft struggle had long passed. That was why I thought that Buddhists couldn't cultivate shaman energy to become a Buddha. Moreover, Arati had said that the 9 spirits were gods, the ultimate. In the words of the Buddhism in our country, it meant becoming a Buddha. Chapter 802. Speaking of the Tai Sui, I couldn't help but think of Shao Jin and the Heavenly Paths Corps from the Yin Corps sect. The shaman energy in my body came from them. I had been stuck at the middle stage of the Seal Heavenly Master Realm for a long time. Aside from the fact that I hadn't found a suitable cultivation technique, the most important reason was that I didn't have a lot of shaman energy to absorb. I guess that Old Master Yuan's ultimate goal was to become the living Tai Sui, which was a good thing for me. Perhaps I could get a lot of shaman energy from him to increase my cultivation base. However, Xiao Jin and the Heavenly Pass Corps had offered their shaman energy to me. I didn't ask for it. Moreover, they were transformed from the stars in the sky. They weren't born through some cruel means. However, old Master Yuan was different. What he had done was against the natural order of things. He had killed people and taken their souls. This is something that cannot be tolerated by the heavenly Tao. I can understand this. I knew how strong the living Tai Sui was. Even Yin Nantian, who was a young god celestial master, couldn't resist it. If old Master Yuan really got his way, who knew what kind of scene it would be? Although I longed for the shaman energy from the living Tai Sui, I couldn't let old Master Yuan's scheme succeed. Fortunately, I knew old Master Yuan's goal. It wasn't too late. We still had time to stop him. However, I didn't understand why he would tell Fong Min when he was going to kill her. He knew that Fong Min would tell me about it. At that time, I wouldn't just stand and watch. Moreover, when he saw the evil sacrificial spirit, he was so scared. As long as the evil sacrificial spirit and I got involved, he wouldn't be able to achieve his goal. Then why did he do this? Could it be that he had other motives? After thinking about this, I suddenly realized that the evil sacrificial spirit wasn't here. I was alone, so I wasn't old Master Yuan's match. Could it be that old Master Yuan already knew about this? I seemed to sense a hint of provocation in his words. At this moment, Fong Min was eagerly looking at me. Her chin kept shivering, as if she wanted to say something. However, she didn't dare to interrupt my train of thought. Fong Min was the most important part of this. If I wanted to stop old Master Yuan's scheme, I had to protect her life. But now that the evil, sacrificial spirit has left, it will be difficult for me to deal with it alone. However, I still have the snake spirit and Tong Tong. Both of them are seal heavenly masters, so they might be able to fight against old Master Yuan. Since old Master Yuan had indicated that he would not come to take Fong Min's life until 6 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, she would be safe for the time being. I told Fong Min my plan and told her not to be afraid. As long as she stayed with me, she would be safe. After listening to my words, Fong Min still looked worried. However, she seemed to know that she couldn't do anything about it. She could only trust me, so she nodded and stood on the side without saying anything. Fong Min's words had helped me understand the whole situation. However, I still don't know how he became a monk. Therefore, old Master Yuan's words couldn't change my previous plan. I collected my thoughts and signaled Monk Mingjue to continue walking into the village. Fong Min had been to Grandpa Yuan's house when she was still a guest of the Red and White Guard. That was why we followed her to the place. At this moment, the gate of Grandpa Yuan's house was closed. We had to call him a few times before someone came out. The one who opened the gate was a middle-aged man holding a crutch. From his appearance, I guessed he was the one Fong Min had mentioned before. He was Grandpa Yuan's eldest son, the one with a broken leg. When he saw so many of us, he looked nervous. He didn't let us in but asked, "What's the matter?" I told him the purpose of our visit. After listening to me, the middle-aged man's face stiffened. He cursed loudly and was about to close the gate. I stepped into the house and told him that this matter was related to many people's lives. Then I explained why his family had so many accidents that year. The middle-aged man seemed to know that there was a reason for what had happened to his family. After listening to me, he was shaken. He invited us to his room to discuss the details. After discussing for a while, the middle-aged man agreed to let us break Grandpa Yuan's grave. We didn't have time to waste. I took the group back to the barren mountain. It was noon, the time of the day when yang energy was the strongest. Fortunately, we had the Yin scattering formation in this place. The Yin energy inside the grave had almost disappeared. We weren't afraid that the Yin energy inside the grave would harm ordinary people. However, to be safe, I asked the others to step back. Monk Mingjue was the only one standing next to me. Breaking a grave was easy for me, and I didn't need to use many tricks. I just wanted to take out the armor-removing sword and slash at the grave. The soft soil on the top of the grave suddenly burst open. The flat ground was now a hole that was several meters deep. I noticed Monk Mingjue's surprised face. It seemed he had never seen this kind of trick before. However, I didn't mind him. I walked to the hole and craned my neck to see. I thought that after I slashed the sword, Grandpa Yuan's body would be exposed. I didn't expect to see such a strange scene. Grandpa Yuan's body wasn't in the grave. There wasn't even a broken piece of the earthen jar. There was a faint yellow barrier with Tao energy. This barrier gave me a familiar feeling, but I couldn't remember where I had seen it before. After seeing this, I had an idea. Fong Min was in charge of Grandpa Yuan's funeral. If someone had placed something in the grave, she would have known. Since Grandpa Yuan's remains weren't in the grave, it meant that someone had secretly moved his remains away after he was buried. Since I couldn't break the barrier with the armor-removing sword, the person who had set up this barrier should be stronger than me. However, if he had moved Grandpa Yuan's remains away, why would he set up this barrier here? Could it be that he wanted to give people the misconception that he was hiding something? This thought popped up in my head. However, I quickly denied it. The crack in the ground that the evil spirit had created was still there, and the faint aura of a true dragon was constantly emitted. In that case, that person might have buried old Master Yuan's remains in a deeper place and left a barrier here to prevent others from finding old Master Yuan's remains. If so, I could conclude that the scattering formation around the grave was also set up by this person. It seemed that old Master Yuan's matter was deliberately done by someone, and old Master Yuan was just a chess piece. However, I didn't know why this person wanted to raise a living Tai Sui fungus. The person who had done this must have something to do with his personal benefits. With that thought, I immediately connected the Thai Buddhism incident to this place. However, it didn't make sense. Why would Thai monks travel tens of thousands of miles to this place? Moreover, how could they understand Taoist techniques and choose Grandpa Yuan's remains? Besides Thai Buddhism, only the shamans had a direct connection with witchcraft energy. Could it be that the people of the shaman tribe had done this place? If that was the case, everything that had happened here could be explained. If the people of the shaman tribe wanted to increase their cultivation base, they needed to use witchcraft energy. However, witchcraft energy was different from Tao energy. Tao energy could be converted into true dragon energy. However, witchcraft energy could only be obtained from the Tai Sui. I knew that there were only two Tai Sui in existence. One was in the Grand Palace of Thailand, and the other was Shao Jin. However, his whereabouts were unknown. If he deliberately hid, no one could find him. If that was the case, the people of the shaman tribe had no choice but to create a living Tai Sui fungus in this place. With that thought, I didn't know if I should continue to stop them or not. I stood still and gazed at the yellow barrier. I was a little bewildered. All of a sudden, I saw something familiar through the yellow light. I didn't dare to jump to a conclusion, so I went closer to see what was going on. After staring at it for more than 1 minute, I remembered that it was the same thing the fatty had used to fight against Monk Miao Ju outside the spirit sealing tower. At that time, the fatty had told me that the formation was a life-saving technique that Jinren had taught him. I guess it wasn't easy for outsiders to learn this formation. It seemed that the person who had set up the formation was someone from the divination sect. Moreover, this person was related to witchcraft energy. A name popped up in my head, Nangong. His whereabouts were erratic, and his way of doing things was unpredictable. I guessed that he was the one who had done this. Thinking about Nangong, I couldn't help but think that I had something to do with him. According to Nangong's usual behavior, he was always helping me get something. Was it possible that he was training a living Tai Sui fungus for me? Thinking of this, I was overwhelmed with shock. Nangong's methods had been too cruel. He had killed the Laozhan sect's master and made old Yuan transform into a living Tai Sui fungus. I couldn't accept that he treated people's lives as a joke. Even if he succeeded and made old Yuan transform into a Tai Sui fungus, I wouldn't hesitate to kill him. I made up my mind and stood up to shake my body. If the armor-stripping sword couldn't break the barrier, I would have to use my strongest attack. I turned my head and signaled the others to step back. Monk Mingjue wasn't surprised. When Monk Mingjue saw my stern face, he didn't dare to ask anything. He quietly stepped back for dozens of meters. After the others had stepped back, I took out the Xian Yuan sword from my mouth and stepped into the 9-star heavenly dipper. At the same time, my Tao energy continuously flowed into the Xian Yuan sword. Chapter 803. The crack continued to expand, as if it was about to split the entire mountain. A moment later, a deep hole appeared on the mountain. At the bottom of the pit was a huge black vat. After the dust settled, I landed in the hole and looked at the vat. The black vat was floating in the air, and many kinds of auras were moving under it. True Dragon Qi, Buddhist Qi, Yin Qi, and Shaman Qi were evenly distributed on the Taiji diagram below. The Tai Chi diagram was the #1 diagram in China. From the pillars of the Temple of Confucius's Dashang Hall to the symbols of Laozi's Laguantai, the Three Reeds Palace, and the Baiyun Temple, the Taoist priest's Taoist robe, the fortune teller stall, the book covers of Chinese medicine, Qigong, martial arts, and traditional Chinese culture, to the national flag of South Korea, the Singapore Air Force emblem, and the boar emblem. The Tai Chi diagram was everywhere. It was clear how important the Tai Chi diagram was. The scene in front of me confirmed my previous guess. Yin and Yang gave birth to the Tao, and the Tao gave birth to Yin and Yang. Yin and Yang complemented each other. They could restrict and transform each other at the same time. The true Dragon Qi was a spiritual Qi of extreme Yang, and so was the Buddhist Qi. However, the souls of those people earlier were pure Yin Qi, which energy wasn't as gentle as true dragon energy, and it wasn't as sharp as Yin energy either. It was a kind of spiritual energy in between. The function of the Tai Chi diagram was to mix the pure Yin energy with the pure Yang true dragon energy and convert them into Witch energy. However, the Tai Chi diagram and the pure Yin and Yang energy couldn't be converted into Witch energy. There had to be a special method, just like the Great Formation in the Wangwu Utopia. After observing for a while, I flew back to the sky and looked down. It did not take me long to see something. The stones scattered around the Tai Chi diagram looked fragmented, but after observing for a while, it wasn't hard to see that they were placed in a very specific position. It was the layout of a formation. Although I hadn't studied the formation in the Wangwu Utopia that could convert Witch energy, the formation in front of me had the same function. The Wang family's ancestor had spent a lot of effort to create the Great Formation in the Wangwu Utopia, and Nangong's cultivation was clearly inferior to the Wang family's ancestor. To be able to set up such a large formation here, it was unknown how much effort he had put in. Although it was strange that Nangong was Guanjinren's junior brother, the Zhanche faction had always been good at formations. With Nangong's identity, it was understandable that he was proficient in formations. Of course, it was also possible that the formation here was the same as the formation in Wangwu Grotto, and it was unknown how Nangong obtained it. Thinking of this matter was basically straightened out. I heaved a sigh of relief and flew toward the black vat hovering in the air. I was ready to break the formation. But at this moment, a blood-curdling scream suddenly sounded from the foot of the mountain. I turned around and saw Fong Min in the crowd at the foot of the mountain. She was holding her head and rolling on the ground. The scream I had just heard came from her. I cursed under my breath. Old Man Yuan must have realized that I was about to take action. In a moment of desperation, he decided to kill Fong Min in advance and take her soul to speed up the transformation process. At this moment, I couldn't care less about the black vat. I turned around and flew toward Fong Min. Blood oozed out of her 7 orifices. She looked really scary. When the people around saw her in this state, they all looked scared. No one dared to go forward to check on her. Only Monk Mingjue knew what was going on. He seemed to understand what had happened. He grabbed Fong Min's hand and kept chanting Buddhist scriptures in an attempt to calm her down. Although Buddhist scriptures could clear one's mind, he was still too weak. Old Man Yuan was at the peak of the Yang God realm, and he couldn't resist him. After I landed, I hurried to stop Monk Mingju, asking him to stand to the side to protect me. At this moment, Fong Min didn't have any ghosts around her. Old Man Yuan was still haunting her dream. Monk Mingju nodded and asked all the monks to sit cross-legged surrounding Fong Min and me. I took a deep breath and pressed Fong Min's hand to calm her down. Then, I placed my hand on Fong Min's forehead and entered her dream. As soon as I stood still, I saw Old Man Yuan standing in front of me. He was holding an ash-gray object in his hand. It was one of Fong Min's 3 souls. In the Nangong Palace's formation, Old Man Yuan had lost his mind. I didn't want to talk nonsense with him. I summoned Tong Tong and the snake spirit, asking them to fight with me. Since the enemy was in front of us, the snake spirit wasn't as noisy as it used to be. As soon as it came out, it transformed into its true form and attacked Old Man Yuan. I was worried that the snake spirit would be at a disadvantage. I hurried to take out the Xian Yuan sword and asked Tong Tong to join the fight. Since I had embarked on the path of cultivation, I had experienced countless battles and had accumulated a lot of experience. Even a lion would use its full strength to fight a rabbit. Not to mention that Old Man Yuan was very strong. That was why I didn't dare to hold back from the beginning. The Xian Yuan sword in my hand was filled with Tao energy. At the same time, my shaman energy was ready in my body. I wanted to attack the second time after the first attack. Tong Tong and the snake spirit were entangled with Old Man Yuan. With my full strength, Tong Tong and the snake spirit, even if Old Man Yuan's cultivation base was much higher than mine, I was confident that I could defeat him. However, after I forced the sword energy out of the Xian Yuan sword, I was dumbfounded. It wasn't that Old Man Yuan was too strong and the sword energy of the Xian Yuan sword didn't work. It was that Old Man Yuan's strength was much weaker than I had imagined. When he had 9 scars on his head, the evil spirit had told me that his cultivation base was at the peak of the Yang God realm. Now that he had 1 more scar, according to Monk Mingjue, he was only a step away from becoming a Buddha. His strength must have increased again. Although I was confident in this fierce battle, I was also prepared for a bloody battle. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this? While I was thinking, Old Man Yuan had forced the snake spirit and Tong Tong to retreat. He was now attacking me. His hands were covered in thick shaman energy as he slapped at me from a distance. Looking at the approaching shaman energy, I felt a little emotional. I had experienced many battles in my life, but it was my first time facing shaman energy. Instinctively, I wanted to dodge the attack. However, as I was about to dodge, an idea popped up in my head. Old Man Yuan's fighting power didn't seem to be as strong as I had imagined. I could try to use the sky devouring technique. I had just learned to resist this attack. The sky devouring technique was something I had just learned, and it wasn't appropriate to use it to fight the enemy. However, after the idea popped up in my head, I couldn't suppress it. On the other hand, the sky devouring technique had devouring power. At this moment, Old Man Yuan's shaman energy was much stronger than mine. If the sky devouring technique couldn't resist his attack, it would be fine. However, if it could, I would be able to digest all of his shaman energy. My shaman energy cultivation base hadn't improved for a long time. If I could devour his energy this time, it would be a great help to my strength. Many thoughts flashed in my head. After a while, I gritted my teeth. Fortune is found in danger. I will try to block this attack with a heaven-devouring art. If I can't block it, it won't be too late for me to switch to other methods. After all, with Old Man Yuan's attack power, it was impossible for him to kill me in 1 hit. After confirming it, I didn't hesitate anymore. I stood where I was and didn't try to dodge. I just circulated the sky-devouring technique in my body. Seeing that I didn't move, Old Man Yuan sped up his attack. Just as he was about to hit my chest, the serpent spirit and Tong Tong sped up and tried to stop him. When I saw them, I sent them a telepathic message to stop them. Although the serpent spirit and Tong Tong didn't know what I was planning, they were used to obeying me. When they heard me stop them, they stopped. Soon, Old Man Yuan's palms slammed down on my chest. At this moment, the sky-devouring technique in my body had been activated to the extreme. A suction force came from my chest and sucked the shaman energy from Old Man Yuan's hands into my body. After a few seconds, the shaman energy in his shriveled hands had disappeared. I was a little surprised. On one hand, I had blocked Old Man Yuan's attack. Moreover, it seemed that I had done it with ease. On the other hand, Old Man Yuan was worthy of being the incarnation of the Tai Sui. The pure shaman energy in his body couldn't be compared to that of the sacrificial evil spirit. The sky-devouring technique didn't only have a suction force, but it also had a transformation force. After absorbing the shaman energy, I continued to use the sky-devouring technique. Soon, I had absorbed the shaman energy and sent it to my heaven's veins. I felt so comfortable that I couldn't help but stretch my body. Old Man Yuan was surprised. Of course, he didn't know about the sky-devouring technique, which was a peerless technique. He just retreated slightly and stared at me. However, he couldn't see anything strange. Soon, the doubt on his face turned into anger. His hands were filled with shaman energy again. He turned around and attacked me for the second time. I was impatiently waiting for him. Seeing this, I was overjoyed. I pretended to wave the Xianyuan sword in my hand twice, and immediately took the initiative to welcome his palms on my chest. This time, I didn't pretend to be as relaxed as before. Instead, I pretended to be ready to fight. No matter what, Grandpa Yuan had his own intelligence. If he saw my relaxed face, he would probably turn around and run away in a few moments. After his palms hit me for the second time, I deliberately retreated and pretended to be hurt. However, I felt so comfortable that I wanted to scream. After absorbing a huge amount of shaman energy into my body, it quickly changed. In just a blink of an eye, it had gathered in my heaven's veins. My cultivation base had advanced again. When the snake spirit and Tong Tong saw my appearance, they became anxious. They rushed over to check on me. I secretly used telepathy to ask the two of them to return to my body. They didn't need to fight anymore. Although the two of them were puzzled, they couldn't ask anything. They quickly followed my order. When Old Man Yuan saw my appearance, he immediately followed up with another attack. Just like that, I pretended to be hurt to lure him to attack me. In the blink of an eye, Old Man Yuan had attacked me dozens of times. Every attack was aimed at my chest. I wasn't too familiar with the sky-devouring art. When Old Man Yuan attacked me quickly, I managed to swallow all of the shaman energy. However, I also spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. I didn't do it on purpose. I was really hurt. Of course, Old Man Yuan was in a worse state than me. When he finally stopped, the huge amount of shaman energy on his body had shrunk by half. He stood there and looked at me in fear. It was as if he was looking at a strange beast. I was silent for a while. After I had digested all of the shaman energy, my injuries were instantly healed. I couldn't help but puff out my chest. My aura also increased. Seeing that, Old Man Yuan's eyes were filled with fear. He turned around and ran. His figure instantly disappeared into the darkness. Of course, I didn't chase after him. I had come here to save Fong Min. Now that Old Man Yuan had run away, Fong Min could be considered to have been saved. I turned around and flew back to Fong Min's soul. After confirming that she wasn't hurt, I reached out to grab her and left the dream. After coming out, I returned Fong Min's soul to her body. However, her soul was injured, so she wouldn't wake up for a while. After confirming that Fong Min was all right, I closed my eyes and checked my body. The shaman energy I had absorbed this time was now settling in the vein of the heavens. After a quick check, I was shocked. The amount of shaman energy I had absorbed this time was almost the same as the one I had absorbed from the heavenly law corpse servant in the Corpsine sect. Chapter 804. Although I was excited, I wasn't in a hurry to refine the shaman energy. The most important matter at hand was to deal with Grandpa Yuan. Even though I'd already forced him to retreat, I couldn't let this matter drag on. Thus, I stood up and asked Monk Mingju to take care of Fong Min while I turned and walked toward the black vat. After going through so much, Monk Mingju naturally listened to me and immediately nodded in acknowledgement. I leaped up and quickly arrived in front of the black vat. Even though Grandpa Yuan had escaped from the previous battle, he had suffered a great loss. It was a good opportunity to kill him. As I pondered, I drew the armor-removing sword and circulated the shaman energy in my body. Using the 9 stars heavenly dipper, I slashed at the vat. Old Master Yuan had yet to complete his transformation. As long as he destroyed the huge vat, the formation before him would dissipate, and Old Master Yuan would be able to break through it without even having to attack. Just as everything was about to end, something unexpected happened. A figure suddenly appeared in front of the vat. With a sweep of his hand, the armor-removing sword chi was dispersed. I originally thought that it was Grandpa Yuan who was putting up a desperate struggle, but when I lifted my head and retracted the sword chi, I saw that it was Nangong. Originally, I had only guessed it. Now that he had appeared, it was confirmed. After blocking the armor-removing sword chi, Nangong didn't look at me, but turned to check the vat behind him. Then, he frowned and looked at me. After a long while, he said, "Do you really want to do this?" He was very direct, so I didn't waste any more words. I nodded and asked, "Do you have a conscience to use such a vicious method?" Nangong's expression didn't change. He shook his head and said, "To achieve great things, you naturally have to pay a price. If you can't bear to do it, I'll do it for you." Even though I'd already expected it, I couldn't help but feel embarrassed when I heard him say that. I couldn't help but say, "You say that you're helping me, but have you ever considered my feelings? What's the difference between you and a man-eating demon? Are human lives as worthless as grass in your eyes?" I really couldn't bear it. For a long time, many people, including Nangong, had been surrounding me. They wouldn't tell me what they were doing, but they kept saying that they were doing it for me. I could still tolerate other things, but the demonic methods in front of me were really hard to accept. Hearing my question, Nangong's complexion was still as calm as before. He nodded and said, "It's because of your feelings that I did this. In the end, your strength is still too weak. If you want to fight against it, it is too difficult. Furthermore, we don't have enough time. We need to take some measures." With that, he raised his head to look at the sky. His brows were tightly furrowed, and there was an indescribable worry on his face. I sighed and calmed myself down. I walked in front of him and said softly, "I know that you are worried, but whether these things will succeed or not is up to my fate. In the end, I still have to rely on myself to walk this path step by step." After I said that, Nangong stared at me intently. After a long while, he suddenly smiled. "You're right. You naturally have to walk your own path." Originally, there was anger hidden in his expression, as well as some resentment that Iron did not meet his expectations. But at this moment, it was completely different. After he finished speaking, he laughed twice and stepped aside. I didn't know why his attitude had changed, but his action of getting out of the way meant that he had chosen a compromise. Thus, I didn't hesitate anymore and flew toward the big black vat. The dismantling armor sword slashed down, and the big black vat vanished in just a blink of an eye. As for Old Man Yuan's corpse, it turned into dust with a loud bang, completely dissipating from the world. Since the skeleton was damaged, the Tai Chi diagram lost its effect and stopped working. The true dragon energy on the Tai Chi diagram sank into the ground at a speed visible to the naked eye, leaving only a mass of dark, Yin energy floating in the air. That mass of Yin energy contained the souls of the previous 4 victims. They had lost their innocent lives because of me. With that thought, I felt a little guilty. After pondering for a while, I waved my hand and collected all the Yin energy into Xiang Lu's bag. I planned to give it to Monk Mingju, who would then send them to the 9 Serenities Samsara. At this moment, Nangong hadn't left yet. He stood at his spot and watched me destroy everything he had prepared. However, he still wore a smile on his face. I still had a lot of questions about this matter. After dealing with some of them, I went to him and asked him about them one by one. Nangong seemed to be in a good mood. He didn't conceal anything and told me everything. According to him, when the heavenly past corpse of the corpse insect died, he recognized that the amount of shaman energy was extremely low. If he wanted to succeed, he had to find another way. As for Old Master Yuan, he had been following me in secret for the past few years. That was how he knew about it. Later, when he wanted to make the Tai sway, he remembered this matter. He He decided to use an ancient technique of the witch clan that had been lost for a long time to do an experiment on Grandpa Yuan's corpse. When Wen Tianxiang made the true dragon's vein, he had to put in a lot of effort. If Nangong wanted to make the Tai sway, it wouldn't be easy. Although he had the ancient technique, he didn't have much confidence. He could only do his best and leave the rest to the heavens. He had to follow the records in the ancient books. First, he found a wisp of true dragon qi in a Buddha sarira. Then, he went to Grandpa Yuan's tomb. Although the ancient technique required yin energy to neutralize the true dragon qi, the amount of yin energy in Grandpa Yuan's corpse was too small. It couldn't resist the true dragon qi, which was the yang energy. With Nangong's ability, he could remove the yin energy in the corpse with just a wave of his hand. However, during this process, the corpse would be damaged. Moreover, he had to be extra careful with every step he took. He couldn't be hasty. Thus, he had to arrange a yin scattering formation outside the tomb to disperse the yin energy in the corpse. By the time the yin qi had almost completely dissipated, a year had already passed. During this time, Nangong didn't stay idle. Aside from taking time to check the tomb, he also searched for 4 people with a single element. A year later, he had found the 4 people, but he was still missing another person with an extreme yin element. Later on, when Feng Min came to pay her respects to old Master Yuan, Nangong bumped into her. She had searched far and wide, only to find what she was looking for without much effort. She had finally put together the last piece of the puzzle. According to the time he had mentioned, it was possible that Feng Min had felt uneasy after receiving my warning. She had come to pay her respects to Grandpa Yuan, which was why she had met her end. In other words, my kind reminder almost caused Feng Min to die. After everything was ready, Nangong began the final arrangement. He didn't ask Grandpa Yuan to take Feng Min's life, because a person with the yin element would have some yang energy in her body when she was alive. That would make her soul impure. Therefore, he had asked Grandpa Yuan to appear in Feng Min's dream every day to force her to die. During this process, the yang energy in her body would be forced out. When the yin year, the yin month, and the yin day came, he would force her to commit suicide. People who committed suicide had strong resentment. Coupled with her extreme yin element, her 3 souls wouldn't scatter after her death. She wouldn't fall to the 9 serenities, and her resentment would overflow. That was how she got the extreme yin soul. It was the last and most important part. At this point, I finally understood why Grandpa Yuan had harassed Feng Min for half a month, but hadn't taken her life yet. It was because of this reason. I knew what happened next, so Nangong didn't say anything. After listening to everything he had to say, I remained silent. Although I did not participate in this matter, everything happened because of me. Regarding this, I really feel guilty. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Nangong smiled wryly. He looked at me and said, "Do you know that after tomorrow, the living Tai Sui will be complete? You can swallow it to replenish your witchcraft energy. When you advance to the completion realm, you can turn the Tai Sui into your Yang spirit and advance to the Yang God, Celestial Master." The Celestial Master of the Wu tribe had told me about the Tai Sui as his Yang spirit in the imperial tomb of the Shang dynasty. Although witchcraft energy and Tao energy could be converted, they couldn't replace each other. It wasn't difficult for people who cultivated Tao energy to advance to the Yang God, Celestial Master level. They just needed to reach the completion realm, understand the heavenly Tao, and refine a Yang spirit. However, people who cultivated witchcraft energy were different. Even if they reached the completion realm, they had to swallow a living Tai Sui and turn it into their Yang spirit. It was for this reason that, although the Wu tribe led by Shin Nong was the most powerful force in the world, it eventually weakened. In the end, Xin Yuan, who cultivated Tao energy, became the Orthodox clan, while the Wu tribe hid in the mountain and sea realm and didn't care about worldly affairs. Later, the mountain and sea realm changed. Shin Nong sealed the mountain and sea realm, and the Wu tribe was almost extinct. At the same time, Because of the battle between Monster Emperor Mu and Emperor Ku, blood sacrifices became popular in the Shang dynasty. Almost all the remaining Tai Sui were turned into true dragon veins. Since then, witchcraft energy was on the verge of extinction. Back to me, because of my special identity, Nangong was far more concerned about improving my cultivation than I was. That was why he had secretly arranged everything. I could understand his bitter smile, and I could even understand everything that he had secretly planned. However, the problem was that using such a method to harm innocent people to create the Tai Sui, even if I succeeded in becoming a Yang God Celestial Master, it was not in line with my Tao. Therefore, even if I was tempted by the Yang God Celestial Master, I refused without the slightest hesitation. Of course, the reason I refused was not only because it was against morality, but also because I could go to the Grand Palace in Thailand and find a Tai Sui there to break through to the Yang God level. Nangong had killed so many innocent people. In my opinion, there was no need for him to do so. I told Nangong what I was thinking, but after he heard it, he shook his head and told me that he didn't know why the Tai Sui was wandering in the outer realm, but before he could confirm it, he couldn't determine the existence of the Tai Sui. Therefore, the Tai Sui was not in his consideration. What he said was reasonable, but in my opinion, when the black-robed Asianality talked about the power of the 9 spirits, it wasn't without reason. There was a reason for everything. Even if the Tai Sui didn't exist there was no such thing as a dead end in this world. Eventually, we could find a Tai Sui somewhere else. Just like Shao Jin and the corpse of the heavenly law in the Yin Corp sect, the world was too big. Even after thousands of years of vicissitudes, there were still people or things that the world didn't know existed in some corners. Like me, Nangong, and the sacrificial evil spirit. After listening to me, Nangong sighed and waved his hand. He didn't mention this matter anymore. Perhaps it was because I had mentioned the evil spirit's sacrifice. Nangong told me with a sigh, including the evil spirit's sacrifice, there are only 5 people of the shaman tribe left, which is less than the number of fingers on one hand. When he mentioned the witch tribe, my interest was piqued. Nangong had never told me his identity. Now, I could finally confirm that he was a descendant of the witch tribe. Wang Can's 9 Cauldrons family was also a member of the witch tribe. However, the Fat Father and his son were different. They could only be regarded as people who cultivated witchcraft energy, but they weren't part of the witch tribe. Wang Can, his son, and Nangong, I knew that there were only 3 members of the witch tribe. As for the other 2, I didn't know about them. After asking Nangong, he smiled and told me, Chiyu is also a member of the witch tribe. After listening to him, I was bewildered. Then I got it. According to the historical records, Chiyu was a subordinate of the Yin Emperor. So, it wasn't wrong to say that he belonged to the witch tribe. However, the sacrificial evil spirit said that he was a general under the command of Monster Emperor Jun. When I asked Nangong, he waved his hand and didn't want to talk about it. Chiyu is a member of the witch tribe, and he's just a follower of Monster Emperor Jun. Since he didn't want to talk about it, I didn't ask further. Counting the sacrificial evil spirit, there were only 4 people. Who's the last one? Nangong smiled mysteriously. I know him too. He has a high position and has a special relationship with me. However, he can't tell me. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.